good morning, afternoon, or evening, and welcome to the Bloody Disgusting Network. The following show is just horrifying. Beware.
Sheriff, you're not cheating on your wife if you eat my lemon square.
Your lemon squares taste like ass.
And welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking I wasn't dating him, I was fucking him. We're talking erotic thrillers and neo-noirs. And we're talking about how terrified men are of sexually confident women. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace. And Joe, I have a plethora of lines.
I was going to say, which one about cocaine do you want to say off the top?
I was going to say that's her pussy talking.
I mean, that's a good one, too. Yeah.
There's so many, quotable lines in the sense that I say them in my head, but I probably wouldn't say them in any, normal social situation.
No, this is a Joe Eszterhas script. You can't say any of these things out loud to any civilized guest, ever.
I think you could in the 90s, though, right? That was okay.
We'll get into it.
Oh my god. Well, everyone, we are discussing Paul Verhoeven's Basic Instinct. Really Joe's bread and butter, because he's got that fetish for erotic thrillers.
Oh my god. Yes, give them all to me. Especially ones like this, where there's so many different readings, interpretations. I'm so excited to have this conversation.
There's so much sex, and there's so much house porn. This is like a movie
It's all for me. Yes.
Tailor-made. Oh my god, cater-made. This is a movie tailor-made for you.
Correct. Yes, I will accept all of those things.
But you know what? You're right, though. There is so much to discuss, and I don't think that you and I can hash this out all by ourselves. Try as we might, but, we're not going to. So why don't we bring in our two guests waiting in the wings? Everyone, they are the co-hosts of the Queer Quadrant podcast, which aims to tell you why some of your favorite 4-quadrant blockbusters are maybe not as straight as you think they are. You may have also heard our guest appearance on their show from last year on the 90s classic Cruel Intentions, another erotic heavy movie, by the way.
Yes.
Please welcome Brooke Solomon and Jordan Gustafson.
Hello. I was really hoping you were going to go with a magna cum laude something, like you were saying quotable lines, and I'm like, that's the one my head always goes. So you can just
likewise.
It's impossible not to use that line.
There's just so much talk about pussies in this movie said by men, and it is
always men.
Ridiculous.
Eszterhas is just really in a league of his own as far as dialogue goes. I mean, the fact that he wrote the script essentially in a weekend on no illicit substances at all.
17 mountains of cocaine.
I mean, I'm telling y'all, if there was a movie that made me want to do copious amounts of cocaine, it is this movie right here. But I do take issue with Catherine Trammell being like, have you ever fucked on cocaine, Nick? I was like, no, he probably has, but you can't fuck on cocaine because you cannot maintain an erection on cocaine.
My god.
We know he had a coke addiction.
So he just got used to it. His wiener got used to it.
Right. Right.
Yeah. He's off now because she was the fuck of the century,
Oh my god.
Yeah, another great line.
I think that line is said 2, maybe 3 times in this film.
Well, it's like when you write something good, it's like you have a good bit on Twitter. You got to keep going back to it. You're not going to not do your bit. So, he's going to keep recycling.
Jordan is the king of running bits into the ground. So,
for
he
sure.
would know.
It will probably happen here.
I fully watched this movie and was like, how long until Jordan is like, let's do the Muppets challenge with this. Which human would we keep and which would we do Muppets with?
Well, obviously you keep Catherine Trammell and Kermit is Michael Douglas, and she's like, am I gonna fuck Kermit? I don't know.
This is like some Happy Time Murders energy. I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
Well, there were
Who remembers that movie?
She was pretty happy with the time she was murdering.
Come on.
I mean, it's so funny to me because I can't imagine anyone watching this movie and not thinking that Michael Douglas's character is a stupid piece of shit. Both he's an idiot and he's a piece of shit.
He's the world's worst detective.
It's amazing. He's so stupid. I love it. I fucking love it. And the fact that people are like, I don't know. How are we meant to feel about this Catherine woman? You're like, how are we supposed to feel about Nick? He's the idiot.
Yes. It's so funny too. And we'll talk about, claims of misogyny and homophobia and biphobia and things because that are all sometimes valid complaints that are lobbied against this film. But I would also argue this film, if you're going to cry misogyny, I think you can also cry misandry because the men are all fucking stupid.
Yes. I think that's why this movie, Brooke and I, this is a favorite of both of ours because both of us are lunatics for Paul Verhoeven.
We're big Verhoeven.
As you should be.
Of course, as one must. But it's I think that's how all of his movies sort of skirt through a lot of these trappings or lobbied complaints, especially this movie where people are like, oh, it's so misogynistic, it's biphobic and all these things. And I'm like, well, on one hand, you could see that. But on the other hand, everyone's a terrible person, and honestly, maybe the men more, discounting murder, So it's well...
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't think this is, such a hot take, because this movie really does have, a lot of different interpretations, but I actually think this is one of, my favorite feminist movies, and maybe one of the most, interestingly feminist movies I've ever seen.
Okay, I am really excited to talk about that.
Yeah.
So there are two commentaries that come with this film on the Blu-ray, and one is by director Paul Verhoeven and cinematographer Jan de Bont, and of course, Jan de Bont we know would go on to direct such classics as Twister and Speed.
Of course.
And Speed 2.
And Speed 2, and The Haunting.
Cruise Control.
Classics and hits and misses, yeah.
But the other commentary is with feminist critic and noted author Camille Paglia, and she has a lot of interesting takes on the film, but when she discusses just feminism in general and the lobbies of misogyny against the film, it does seem, honestly, it's not unlike what we feel in the queer community, where I feel like it's a fractured thing, where a lot of, there's different types of feminists that have different ideals about how women should and should not be presented, and what is a strong woman versus what is an evil woman, and how the femme fatale plays into that, because some feminists think the femme fatale is an inherently misogynistic archetype no matter what. So that I'm so excited to get into these because there's so many, as you said, different reads on how you can take this film.
100%,
yeah. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we're really excited to have the pair of you on here as well, because you're both noted bisexuals. And, this movie is, well, it's interesting. I'll confess, I never really looked at it this way. I knew that there was a history of picketing it in the same way that cruising had been in the 1980s, but I didn't realize that a bunch of people were like, oh, this movie, this is maybe putting too strong a term on it, but some people feel like this is the bisexual equivalent of what The Silence of the Lambs did for the trans community. And I was like, whoa, that is strong, and I had never really considered it that way before.
Yeah, and it's not to just be blunt, but imagine being so wrong in your belief. Sorry. Oh no.
But that's the thing, right? We have a bisexual woman as a crazed sociopath or psychopath or whatever you want to call it.
Very valid in all of her actions.
You know what? I'm sorry. I'm going to save this because we are going to get into this shit. Well, why don't we go into this, though? Because, let's go to how this got made, and then
we have to get off before we get off.
Yeah.
Oh my god, there's so much getting off in this movie. There is the sex in this. Well, I'm sorry. The one sex scene between Douglas and Stone that is in the middle of the film is possibly hotter than most porn that I've watched.
Nobody doesn't like Verhoeven. Right. You can always count on him.
Is it realistic? No. Is it
crazy? Hot? Yes.
And that's, with Verhoeven, I haven't seen his entire filmography, but I always get so excited every time a film of his crosses my screen, because I just love his candid approach to sexuality. It's one of the most refreshing things about all of his films, as controversial as many of them are.
Yes.
Right. Well, sex is controversial, especially in North America.
Yeah, and he leans into how controversial it is to Americans. Which, yes, oh gosh, I can't wait.
Well, it's when you said the sex scene, it's this always goes around Twitter, but I feel like the Showgirls pool sex scene constantly just gets floated, and everyone's like, wait, have you guys seen this? And it's yes, and it's a work of art. It's masterful.
Yes.
There will definitely be some tangential Showgirls talk, and if I have my way, some tangential Benedetta talk, because Paul Verhoeven and his interest in the sapphic women of his films is really interesting to me.
Well, I've only seen Benedetta once, and I liked it. I didn't love it, but it's definitely a film that I feel like merits a repeat viewing to fully absorb. Well, so the screenplay for this film, it was written, as we all said, by Joe Eszterhas in the 80s, and it prompted a bidding war until it was purchased by Coralco Pictures for $3 million. And Eszterhas had been the creative source for several other blockbusters like Flashdance and Jagged Edge. He wrote the film in 13 days, so it was a bit longer than a weekend, but maybe not as long as you would expect a film of this length to be.
It's a full 2 hours, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When Verhoeven finally got it in his hands, he actually suggested changes to the script that Eszterhas disagreed with, one of which included a lesbian sex scene that Eszterhas called exploitative. I'm curious about this, as if none of the other sex scenes in this movie feel exploitative.
Exactly. Well, I think that, like, that in and of itself is a really great kind of snapshot of how people felt about, like, queer depictions on screen during this time period where, like, this is an extremely, extremely sexy movie with, like, a lot of salacious stuff in it, but the second that there's a lesbian sex scene, like, that is a bridge too far.
I would say, but at the same time, I feel like if we had that, then because it's a film written by a man, directed by a man, even if it didn't come across as exploitative, people might call it that anyway.
Maybe
100%.
not in 1992, but certainly
Today.
Yeah. But I mean, it's like, you look at Benedetta, like that came out last year, and that has so much lesbian sex, written and directed by the same man.
Yeah.
And it's just, I feel like Verhoeven is kind of like in a weird league of his own, same as Eszterhas, where he just kind of, I don't know, in my opinion, gets a little bit of a free pass because what he's exploring is so unique and so interesting, and he just seems very genuine in what he wants to put on screen.
That's okay. I'm sorry. That is what I was gonna say earlier. That when I lost my train of thought was even with Benedetta, which again is a lesbian nun movie. It never feels grotesque. It never feels like lecherous. Like it always, as you said, genuine is probably the best word I could put on it.
I think it's like also because he's an outsider coming in and critique, like all of his movies are, despite like some foreign ones, etc., so much, especially his American movies, are such a critique on like American culture, and like as we were saying earlier, like America's relationship with sexuality and like sex as like a thing and like as an object and as a thing that people do. And I feel like, I don't know, I think that he is able to critique how we view it and put that into his movie in like such a smart way. And I think honestly the addition of a lesbian sex scene honestly might have helped this movie, because if you are gonna knock some of the sexuality, I feel like it comes in her relationship with Roxy versus like her bisexuality with like Michael Douglas or like other people like within the world, because Roxy sort of gets shunted to the side. So and then it's just like watching her sex versus engaging in sex herself. So I feel like if you had Roxy as like an active participant in the sex itself, it might have even made the film more queer and also like kind of fleshed out that character a little more. Then again, we don't know how the scene would have been shot, etc., but like you can see a way in which that works more. You know?
Yeah. I feel like we can even identify probably where that scene would have taken place or maybe would have been suggested. And I do think it would have fit within the world of the film, but sadly, we don't get that.
I mean, look, there's at least more queerness in this film than there is in the sequel, Basic Instinct 2, Risk Addiction.
Have you seen?
Oh, I own it.
Oh my god.
See, I have never seen it and I never will. I don't
it's so
think
boring.
I can put myself
That's the problem
through
with it. It's not interesting at all. Trace and I covered it for our editorial series back on Bloody when we were still doing those. And it basically just defangs Catherine. So it completely misunderstands the allure of the character. It omits her bisexuality completely. She only fucks men.
Of course.
And it's also so dull. Like, so boring.
But it's so funny, though, because that was 2006, and I think it makes sense to me that what was a mainstream film release in 2006 was releasing any semblance of queerness from a character.
Right.
Yeah, I a lot of these, even though I think that this is a very bisexual movie, the term bisexual is never uttered, and like I think that a lot of people's issues with kind of like the depiction of it, rightfully so, is that it seems, at least sort of like in Eszterhas's mind, as more of a byproduct of Catherine being this kind of like sexually adventurous, like confident woman, and not her like authentic desires. And a lot of times when we see movies that were sort of accidentally or intentionally very queer, when there are spin-offs or sequels, a lot of that does get defanged because everyone sort of realizes what they did and they didn't really mean to do it, and then they have to backtrack because they don't want to commit to it.
Right.
I will say, just to defend myself, because I was the one that kind of made... Well, I guess we decided to watch Basic Instinct 2 on our own, Joe, because we were doing that article. But so Joe and I have only met in person once, and this was the time when we met. And so
God.
As a palate cleanser, we watched The Wachowskis Bound after Basic Instinct 2.
My favorite movie of all time.
Okay.
You want to talk about a well-shot lesbian sex scene.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
But let me tell you how badly Basic Instinct 2 comes off as a result. We were just like, well, here's fucking queer perfection on the screen, courtesy of the Wachowskis. And then you've got this wet, limp noodle of a film, and it's just like, well, I guess I've done too much coke because that movie's not getting me up.
Yeah.
I would still recommend you watch Basic Instinct 2, Risk Addiction, because it's just one of those things where it's like, it's not good, but...
Just full stop. It's not good.
I just feel like you should just watch it.
You just need
look at what this could have been.
Making a great case here.
It sounds like American Psycho 2. Was like the vibe I'm getting there. Yeah. I do have a question though, Trace. Is your Blu-ray the one that comes with the ice pick or not?
The ice pick?
No, it's a basic one.
That was a collector's edition.
This film has, I guess maybe it's on 4K now, but yeah, my Blu-ray is from 2007.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So you've been a long time fan.
It's an antique.
I bought this last week, but it's just because there hasn't been a new Blu-ray release since 2007, but there may be a 4K out now. I'm not 100% sure.
There is, yes.
All of his movies have, actually, I was having a lot of I guess I was having frustrations with this because I am a very big physical media person. And was trying to get some of his movies, but the RoboCop prints, even though they have new ones come out, they're not always the best versions of the movie. Yeah, they're often bad. Yeah, which is really frustrating. This doesn't have, it's not in circulation a lot. Hollow Man, Starship Troopers, I think just got a 4K, but a lot of his movies aren't really around a lot, which is so frustrating because you're he's one of our finest auteurs. What are we doing, folks?
Criterion Collection.
Well, he's not American.
That's true.
Come on.
Yeah, I don't think he has any films on Criterion, which is shocking to me.
I believe, is RoboCop?
So RoboCop is, but it was only for a DVD, so it's out of print now, similar to Michael Bay with Armageddon and stuff like that.
Okay. Well,
back when they were trying to no, we respect action and thriller.
Right. We like popular culture too.
Well, okay, so rewinding a bit. So because Verhoeven wanted all these changes, and he would not budge, Eszterhas left the project with producer Ern Winkler. And they bring in this guy called Gary Goldman, and he was subsequently hired to do 4 different rewrites of this script. After the 4th rewrite, Verhoeven admitted his proposals were quote-unquote undramatic and really stupid.
There's that bluntness we love.
So by the 5th draft, the script had reverted back to Eszterhas's original version, with minor visual and dialogue changes, and Eszterhas received sole writing credit for the film.
Hell yeah.
Okay.
I don't have a ton on casting, but I just want to mention the Sharon Stone of it all, because at the time, she wasn't very big. She'd done, a couple films in the 80s, she got her start doing Wes Craven's Deadly Blessing. She had worked with Verhoeven on Total Recall, which...
one of the hottest performances of all time.
It's so good. It's so fucking good. She steals the first part of that movie.
Oh my God. You see her come on screen and you're like, halt, slam on the brakes. What are we doing?
She's so talented.
I will say, so have y'all seen the remake of Total Recall with Colin Farrell, Jessica Biel, and Kate Beckinsale?
Unfortunately so.
No.
I will say, it's not good. However, the one good decision that movie makes is that it doesn't kill the Sharon Stone character played by Kate Beckinsale. She becomes a movie-length antagonist for the film.
Yeah. She's also the best part of that movie.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. But anyway, so Michael Douglas, he's the big star here. He is big man of the 80s. He wanted an actress of his caliber next to him. So he actually didn't even want Sharon Stone to be in this movie because he viewed this film as a huge risk. So he wanted another star of equal caliber to take that risk with him. He didn't think if it was someone of lesser caliber, then it would be the same type of risk.
Right. So he was thinking about risk addiction, is what you're saying.
Oh
my God.
Wow.
Commit to the bit. Yes.
So he recommended Kim Basinger. She declined. But he also proposed Julia Roberts, Meg Ryan, Michelle Pfeiffer, Gina Davis, Kathleen Turner, Kelly Lynch, Ellen Barkin, Mariel Hemingway, all of whom declined because of the nudity required for the film. Whereas Verhoeven just came in with maybe Demi Moore.
Honestly, though, like, you hear that list, and, like, Meg Ryan, I think, would have, like, knocked it out of the park, but...
Having seen In the Cut, yes.
That's what I'm
fully
thinking,
agree.
is, like, the In the Cut Meg Ryan, but then my brain also thinks about Gina Davis, and I don't think she would have fit the role, but just, like, Gina Davis, you know what I mean? Right?
I would, in fact, see Gina Davis in anything. I just think the story about risk assessment, risk addiction is so funny because you look at how audiences actually reacted to this film and the combination of Michael Douglas and Sharon Stone, and you're like, well, he really didn't have anything to worry about since clearly he got away completely scot-free as far as the public's concerned.
That is true.
And that's the thing. So, Verhoeven, like, it was her performance in Total Recall that said no. It was the switch in her character right before she gets killed, where she goes from, like, evil villain to, like, oh my god, I'm your wife again, sorry. That was the moment that got it. Sharon Stone was paid $500,000 for a movie with a $49 million budget for her performance in this film.
It's bananas. It's honestly a little insulting.
Yeah.
It's super insulting, but then you also think, who benefits most from this movie as a result? Like, Michael Douglas has a solid career. He goes on to have a number of even movies within this sort of subgenre of erotic thrillers. Like, he's got Disclosure on the horizon and a couple of other things.
With Demi Moore.
There we go.
And she is really good. So when you said her name, I was like, oh, I could see it. But at the end of the day, the only thing people talk about with this movie is Catherine Trammell. So the pay is shit, but I also think, like, this is the movie that gives us Sharon Stone.
But then also, like, takes her away at the same time. Like, you get this boom, like, it's a star-making turn. But then when, like, one movie is so directly identified to you and you're so hypersexualized and so vilified and talked about and, like, discussed that it, like, I feel like it has such a taint on, unfortunately, her career for so long. And, like, obviously she has other good performances, like, obviously is amazing in Casino and some other stuff, but, like, she never kind of recaptures the star or heights that this movie gives her. And I think it is partially, like, this movie's fault a little bit,
Well, no.
Not its fault, but, like, America's interpretation of the movie, rather.
Yes, that. And that's something that we will be talking about a lot in these readings of this film, because I feel like a lot of it is how stupid people are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, hugely.
Well, it's what we latch onto as audiences, as critics, and as people who pay attention to how much money a movie makes, too.
Also, I just want to say that Michael Douglas had a no, like, full frontal nudity clause for this movie.
No,
so
get
I'm
outta
just
here.
like, okay, so you want to have an actress of quote-unquote equal caliber to share the risk with you, but you're not going to share the same risk of full frontal nudity? Fuck off.
He has to
Yes.
fucking drop the trowel. What are we doing?
Yes.
And he wears that sweater. You expect people to be like, you're, like, sexy in a sweater? What are you doing here,
V-neck
sir?
sweater in the gay club.
Awful.
An all-time
I have
moment.
thoughts about that sweater.
Positive or negative?
Let's just say that they are Chris Sarandon in Fright Night.
Okay.
Well, let's move into some controversy then, okay? As if we haven't already discussed some already, but before filming even started, so there was drama around this movie for a full year before it even had its premiere in March of 92. The script somehow made its way into the hands of Queer Nation, and this was an activist organization founded in March of 1990 in New York City. The basis of it, though, was that the four founders were outraged at the escalation of anti-gay violence on the street and prejudice in the arts and media. So the group was a way to take action to address those issues. They became known for their confrontational tactics, their slogans, and their practice of outing people.
Oof.
Yeah. We've talked about these folks before, have we not, Trace?
Have we?
It just, all of those tactics sound very similar to previous episodes. Maybe I'm just thinking of, like, controversy around Silence of the Lambs and Cruising, but, like, the public outing of people, like, that was the thing that they tried to do with Jodie Foster.
Oh, you know what? I don't know if it was the same group, but I would not be surprised if it was.
Right. Okay. Sorry, continue.
No, you're good. Okay, so what I find fascinating is on this Blu-ray and also on the DVD that would have come out in the early 2000s, there are interviews with Queer Nation co-founder Jonathan Katz and one of its activist members, Annette Gaudino, like in the making of documentary of this film, which I thought was really interesting. They go into their issues with the film that centers around a homicidal, evil queer woman, which continued a long line of lesbian psychotics in film, plus, of course, the fact that the quote-unquote real lesbian winds up dead, and the bisexual woman ends up with a man by the time the credits roll.
Mm-hmm.
And like, there's like immediately like, it's like that's like my favorite thing about bi erasure. It's my favorite thing. I love bi erasure. It's so fun,
so satisfying.
No matter what, like however you portray it, people on any side of any community will be able to critique it, and it's just like you hear in that line. Subtle biphobia, just like right there. Right. It's so beautiful.
The real queer woman dies, and the fake queer woman ends up with a man, so what's the point anyway?
Right. Even though they were dating.
Yeah.
Well, even I'm just like, okay, well, what does that make Beth? Like, do we not count Beth as a potential bisexual woman who's maybe struggling a little bit with her sexuality?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, hugely so. That's, I feel like, a huge takeaway. Like, she is, I think, fully, like, down that camp, and, like, honestly, like, maybe she's into the whole murder thing. We don't know.
Certainly
maybe we find out.
In the past, she was, a little bit, at least.
But it's interesting, though, because, like, so when they, I mean, this is the very end of the movie, but when after she's dead, and they go through her house, and she has all these clippings of, Catherine, you could read that as obsessive, like, a romantic obsession, but you can also read that as an obsession with a murderer, just like what Catherine has with all of the subjects of her books.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. It's just, but the film doesn't give you those easy answers, and I think that's why I think it's telling to the viewer, about the viewer, which route they take on their reading of this film.
Mm-hmm.
It's media literacy at an all-time low at times, it seems.
Yeah. Or selective reading based on what I want to do with this. Like,
yes, how can I use this?
Yeah, it's a lot of agendas.
Yes. So, okay, before filming began, Queer Nation offered a critique of the script and suggested changes that Verhoeven should make, and while most of it was dialogue, they also said that the man should be the killer and the woman should be the detective.
Oh my god. Okay. Well, that is a completely different movie.
Yeah, it's just, it's not that I necessarily hate that movie, but it's so different from whatever this would have been.
Right.
I think it also makes the woman inherently less interesting.
Yeah.
It's hard to say, right? I think we'd have to see what kind of script changes they make, because you can have an interesting detective. Like, Nick is not an interesting person, but I think that's purposeful, or maybe that's just my agenda reading.
Let me say this. Let's say we don't change anything about the script except for the fact that we change, like, the woman, Sharon Stone, is going to play the Nick Curran role, and then Michael Douglas is going to play the Catherine Trammell role. Do you not think there would be cries of misogyny about how stupid and idiotic the female detective character is?
Right. And how easily, like, she's wooed by this man.
Yes.
And how she has, no agency of her own. That's why I think that Michael Douglas being so under the magna cum laude pussy spell is great, because it is sort of like this really to the bone portrayal of, like, how much these types of men are led by their dicks. And I think it really speaks to kind of, like, how society chooses to read certain films, and that is, like, really not a problem, or wasn't a problem for mainstream audiences until, like, now, when you're looking back at it and you're like, wow, this guy is really stupid. But at the time of release, like, everyone just kind of took him as a protagonist at face value.
Right. Yes.
In, like, all of his movies, too. It's, like, it's just, like, Michael Douglas was able to be such a slime ball in so many movies, and, like, people were so on board with it despite what some of his characters would do. Like, you look at Fatal Attraction, and it's like, he's a bad guy in that movie, but, Glenn Close, she is so evil.
She boils a bunny rabbit.
She does try to kill, family. Obviously bad. But, like, people kind of, like, look over his behavior, and it sort of, like, happens with this, because some people are so easy to buy into, like, male behavior because it's what they see on screen so much. Like, male straight behavior, rather.
Right. I mean, the other thing is that people always overlook just how emasculated and, like, the fear of castration that dominates so many of his characters from this period, right? Like, you've got Fatal Attraction, but then also War of the Roses. And it's like Michael Douglas basically is just playing the straight dude who gets his dick and balls stepped on by powerful women. And people are like never seem to pick up on it.
The dream.
Yes.
Have y'all ever seen The War of the Roses?
No.
No.
I've not gone to war with the roses.
It is Danny DeVito directed film, and it is Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner as a married couple who try to get divorced. And it is literally, their last name is Rose. And it is literally just a pitch black comedy about these two people trying to get divorced who just fucking hate each other.
Sounds delightful.
I've heard
So
really
good.
good
It's
things.
amazing.
And it made so much money, right? Like, it was really popular.
Danny DeVito director is so weird. It's
Yeah.
such a weird career.
Well, this is a time, too, when R-rated movies can make $350 million worldwide, because they just can.
Well, and we were open to adult fare. I'm not going to like shit on contemporary films because that's not what I'm interested in doing. But like, we had more of a varied interest in adult films, black comedies, erotic thrillers. Like, there was just a greater appreciation for a wider berth of films.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's all on TV now.
It is.
That's where it lives.
Yeah, that's
Which is
true.
why all these movies are not getting remade as TV shows.
Well,
Yep.
because there's less financial risk in that, right? You don't have to worry about box office. It's just, you gotta get eyes on it. But so Verhoeven's reply, though, to all these protests and stuff, he said Basic Instinct was going to be a big film with a marquee star, so it was an excellent target for these types of groups. But I find it interesting that they chose to pick this, and it really shows how selected they are, because they didn't come after my film The Fourth Man in 1983, which has also controversial queer themes in it.
This is true.
Now, I would say, this is me saying this, of course, Queer Nation didn't exist at the time. I would also say that the queer community was in a bit of a different place in 1983.
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
By the time Basic Instinct comes out, like, we have now gone through the AIDS crisis. I think the reason Queer Nation was created was because, there was a rise in gay crime in the streets. So I get what Verhoeven is saying here, but I think it's a bit, it's ignoring some key cultural milestones with the queer community.
Yeah, one other important thing is that The Fourth Man, very difficult to find nowadays. Hopefully one day it will show up on a streamer or get like a premium Blue or 4K or something. It's also a Dutch film.
Yes.
So people aren't going to be protesting it because
no one's going to watch it.
Well,
yeah,
but that's the thing, though. But that's what he's saying, though. He's saying, like, you're being selective and picking out this film, which is going to be a mainstream, big, wide release, and you're not going after the smaller foreign film that not as many people are going to see, which means you're going after things that more people are going to watch, and not just the content itself.
Right.
Oh my god, it's the Billy Eichner effect. What? Who said that? What?
I feel like it's so frustrating, and I guess like interesting as well, because it's he is saying these things, and it's what's so interesting about this movie, and we'll like dig into it obviously, but it's just that there's so many readings you can have kind of throughout time, and I think it's a movie that benefits from age almost better. Like I think like I'm sure like watching this movie at that time, there would be, and there still are obviously valued arguments against it, but I think seeing how far the queer community has come and like what queer cinema has come out since this movie has only like informed this movie better and made certain aspects of its queer representation more engaging and more thought-provoking, which I don't think maybe at the time, you would get that as much. Like, you didn't have as many out queer things at the time, so when you did have a queer movie, you were like, oh, fuck, it's queer representation. Whereas now, while there's still not a lot of queer representation, there is more of it, and there's a more mixed bag of it, and we can dig into what is queer representation now on screen, but it's, I think, just all fueling this one big sphere of discourse that, like, will continue to be in forever.
So he goes on to say, and again, this is like, because he's from the Netherlands, Amsterdam specifically, and he goes on to say, he's like, homosexuality is not a problem where I come from. This movie, Basic Instinct, is pro-gay. It is biological. It's there, and who cares? Making queerness into a non-issue is the ultimate sign of being an adult about it. It's part of life. And while I agree with that,
I like that sentiment.
It is ignoring the politics of the time in the US. And so I get it, like if he was he was making this in the Netherlands, releasing it in the Netherlands for another, that audience, that would make more sense. I don't know. I don't necessarily view it as irresponsible on his part, but more so he just has his way of thinking, and that's what it's going to be. Cultural ideologies be damned.
Right. Well, that's why I love Verhoeven, because he doesn't really care, and if anything, he wants to pump it up more because he knows that it'll shock American audiences. Like, he's extremely unconcerned with potential backlash, and much more concerned with, like, what backlash do you think I could get out of this? Like, just by doing what I want to do. All of his movies are like that. Like, Showgirls is, I mean, oh my God. Listen, we are massive Showgirls fan. But, like, that's such a great example of a movie that is, like, critiquing, like, American consumerism and capitalism and, like, exploitation of women's bodies. And everyone just absolutely lost their fucking minds over it. So I think that, like, that is definitely par for the course for him. And that's why, you know, even though, like, this film, Basic Instinct, was one of the first times that bisexual characters were this mainstream, just because, like, so few movies were this mainstream, I can understand, obviously, like, the concern around that. But to me, it's one of the most interesting portrayals of bisexuality on screen because it feels, like, messy in all the ways that you think that it would. It doesn't feel like a political statement, and that's why it's so interesting.
But it also, like, she's not a sociopath because she's bisexual.
Exactly. Yes.
And yet, there's a lot of people who read that as implicitly, like, you can't divorce the two. Like, her sexuality is weaponized, and as a result, you can't divorce them.
If anything, it's because she is displaying more quote-unquote masculine man qualities. And you could argue that those are the aspects that make her more likely to be a sociopath because she shares more traits with what we can perceive to be male traits as opposed to female traits.
It's like the men are intimidated by her, not like by her sexual. I think what's so interesting is like you get the 1-2 punch of in the car where, you know, she has the whole smoking, I found that whole cigarette thing. But it comes across as like very male. It's domineering, it's tough, it's, you know, it's like she's very brutish to them, and then you flip that switch for the interrogation scene where Verhoeven's, like, commenting upon how male audiences will view this, while also the men in the movie are viewing it this same way that male audiences end up doing it. But, you know, he's then weaponizing her, like, feminine sexuality, so she is being bisexual and, like, exploring how her, like, gender and, like, performance identity can, like, be used for her advantage, but it's not like that's informing, like, her bisexuality isn't the end-all be-all of her character. Like, she's a killer because she's a killer, but, like, she's using the tools in her arsenal to get what she wants. So it's like, I don't know, it's not, like, empowering, but, like,
I would argue that it is a little empowering. I would argue that it is empowering because we covered this, full disclosure, we covered this film on our main feed too. Of course, we had to do it, and I think on that episode I said that Catherine Trammell is a female character that is so empowered that every social convention is stripped away from her, including the social convention of not murdering people. Like,
no, but to me, I mean, I know the film doesn't give us this context, but to me, it reeks of a woman who's grown up in a man's world being told that she is less than, and she says, "Fuck no, I'm not going to do that."
Right, and because she's also a successful writer, and it's like, men are intimidated inherently by a woman being successful in, like, a financial situation. Like, she is living in a beautiful house with her beautiful girlfriend. Like, men are inherently like, wait, I don't feel, like, comfortable in this. Like, how dare this woman be living comfortably and affordably in a nice place?
Doing so much better than me.
Right. Yeah, because these cops walk in, and it's like, you know those cops aren't making whatever fucking money she's making, so they walk into her house. There's this glass beachside mansion.
Beautiful, stunning.
Second house, folks.
It's very clearly intentional. I mean, one of my favorite lines is the first time that all the cops walk into her house and they see sort of like the matching Picasso, I think, that she has from the guy that she wasn't dating, she was fucking. And the first line is, hers is bigger.
Hers is bigger.
Like,
well, okay, wait. I'm glad you mentioned Picasso, though, because so yes, a lot of her house has Picasso-esque, like, design to it, as well as the opening credit sequence, which plays over, like, the geometric kind of ruby pattern.
It's like a prism.
If y'all don't know, Picasso has been commonly characterized as a womanizer and a misogynist, being quoted as having said to one of his mistresses, "Women are machines for suffering. They are goddesses and doormats." So it is very intentional that the production design puts the work of a misogynist in this woman's house.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to get too far into it because we're still in the production technically, but
sorry. We're so bad at following the rules.
no, this is how it goes, right? Because we're all so fucking excited to talk about it. But I guess the final piece maybe to get us back into the production is that Verhoeven is nothing if not also really fucking good at PR. So, Brooke, I think you mentioned, he knows what is going to ruffle feathers for Americans. And so I think that's part of why he is so flippant, at least in this period of his career when he's making just hit after hit and audiences are eating it up, often misconstruing his messages, but that's fine. But I think at the end of the day, he's like, if people protest my movie, it makes more money because it's got the notoriety factor.
Right. Okay, so let me finish this controversy with these protests then, because you're right. What these did is exactly that. It made this movie more successful. So about 150 members of this queer nation went and protested the movie while it was filming for about 2.5 weeks. They knew every single filming location, showed up every night. They would start cutting cables. They would shine lights into the cameras. Eventually, a 300-foot restraining order was filed against the protesters, and producer Alan Marshall tried to have them arrested. But the cops were like, they're not really breaking any laws, so if you want to arrest anyone, you have to do it yourself. Well, that is exactly what happened. Marshall had cops bring him protesters one at a time, and they would ask him, do you want this person arrested? And he would say yes or no. This disrupted production, leading to a citizen's arrest of Marshall, which didn't lead to anything within the local police department.
Just insane.
Incredible.
Like, again, this is all like, this is in the news.
Yeah.
Like, while this movie is filming. I cannot even imagine. So
they don't do them like they used to.
I know. That's how you must show up on opening weekend.
Right.
Like,
You
it's
gotta know.
gold.
Yeah. So, when the movie did come out, members of the lesbian and bisexual activist group Labia, love that, protested against the film on its opening night. Others also picketed theaters to dissuade people from attending screenings, carrying signs that said, "Kiss my ice pick," "Hollywood promotes anti-gay violence," and in an attempt to spoil the film to dissuade people from seeing it, "Catherine did it, save your money, the bisexual did it." Verhoeven defended the group's right to protest, but criticized the disruptions they caused, saying, fascism is not in raising your voice. The fascism is in not accepting the no. So it opened in theaters on March 20th, 1992, where it opened unopposed by other new releases, by the way, in the number one spot with $15.1 million. And here's some really good 90s box office trajectory for you. It dropped to the number 2 slot the following weekend and stayed there for 3 weeks, before climbing back to the number 1 spot in its 5th week of release, and staying in the number 1 spot for 5 more weeks.
That fucking rules!
Yes. Everyone went to see this movie. When we were covering this movie on the main feed, my mother was like, "Oh, I saw Basic Instinct when it was in theaters. I think your father and I went. I'm gonna watch it again." And she was, I think, slightly horrified, and I was like, "You saw this
Brooke's
in
mom,
theaters?"
It would astound.
But I was like, "You went to the theater and saw this. Do you not remember?" So I think it was just like must-watch viewing for everybody.
It had to.
For sure.
What's the controversy, right? It's like, this is what 100%. Everyone's been talking about for a fucking year.
Any press is good press.
Yeah. So one of my favorite stories about my in-laws is when I found out that they went to Showgirls on the opening weekend as like a date night.
God.
Wow.
What?
Because they were like, it's all over the press. Like, this is the big movie for the weekend. So they wanted to go and see what the fuss was about.
And they were massive Verhoeven fans, converted instantly.
They have the poster in their living room.
No, they fucking hated it. They were
mortified.
Well, Basic Instinct did go on to gross a total of $117.7 million domestically.
God, that rules.
And $223.5 million internationally, for a worldwide gross of $353 million. Again, against that production budget of $49 million, becoming the 4th highest grossing film of 1992. Critical reaction was pretty mixed. We got a Rotten Tomatoes score of 56% with an average score of 6.1 out of 10. Metacritic, it's got a 41 out of 100. However, CinemaScore audiences in 1992 gave the film an average grade of B+, and more modern reviews, Letterboxd users have awarded it a rating of 7 out of 10. And I wanted to say one thing before I pass it over to you, Joe. So, this feminist lady...
Oh my god.
No. Camille Paglia, who does the commentary on the Blu-ray, she denounced the gay activist and feminist protests against Basic Instinct, calling Sharon Stone's performance one of the great performances by a woman in screen history. And she brings up specific instances of going to see this film multiple times in theaters. And she goes, it's interesting when you read these protests from people and you go to a theater and there's exhilaration and laughter. So her first screening was from a primarily black audience who loved it. You talk to people outside, they'd say, oh my God, it was one of the best movies ever made. She saw it again and with a primarily white audience who also loved it. And she kind of says that there are bits of a grotesque elitism in these groups that lobby these complaints about these films that pretend to speak for the people, but in fact are just kind of going for their own agendas. And I think there's a lot to unpack there, especially with the fact that she is using just the audience reaction based on the two audiences she saw the film with. But I do think there's a lot to be said about the nature of film criticism in issues like this, especially as we go into films like today. I mean, we saw They Slash Them a few months ago, which had not the best kind of reaction to it.
Yikes.
Yeah. I think that, I don't know, I mean, you just look at the box office numbers for this, like, clearly there was certainly a level of popularity and intrigue and, like, repeat viewing to, like, get to box office numbers like that.
Right.
And, yeah, I don't know, it's just, we talk a lot, and again, I won't open this Pandora's box, but we talk a lot about, like, sexuality and sex on screen and how that has, like, changed in the modern landscape, but, like, it used to be, like, the sex sells aspect was pretty, like, tried and true. Mm-hmm. Like, if people thought a movie was, like, a little salacious, a little dangerous, you were gonna go check it out. It felt like being just a little bit bad.
Yeah. And, like, now, I'm trying to think of, like, the last time there was, like, a big movie that, made you feel, ooh, a little risky. Let's go to the movie to see, like, what the hot goss and, like, what the titillation is. Like, there's not, like, it doesn't really exist anymore.
Mainstream blockbuster. Yeah. I would say, again, it's like made it to TV. Yeah, Game of Thrones is probably, like, the most recent one that, like, comes
right. Huge. Yeah. Everyone's like, oh, we gotta tune in.
Yeah. Stuff like that.
That is very true. Yeah, because I was my mind immediately went to Blonde, the new Armos, but that's going to Netflix.
Right, exactly. And it's like you can already see the discourse like forming. The cloud is coming in, and it's like at the time, like obviously there was discourse on these things, but there were so many more erotic thrillers that it wasn't like it's hard to believe that each one that came out was full of like this cycle that we currently now go through. If there's a movie that has any sort of like blatant sexuality or like sex on screen, you know?
It's also much easier to just close a newspaper than it.
Polia's comments are a bit dismissive of, again, like the real life politics at the time of what was happening in the queer community. However, at the same time, I also think it is a little bit prescient especially in modern days with like film Twitter and how people, I'm using general people, are just looking for something to be upset with. And I'm not really saying that's the case here with this film. I mean, maybe it was, but again, I think there are societal and cultural things happening in 1992 that would merit some of the response. But it's not like, again, some people just want to be upset about something because, hey, as you said, Jordan, all publicity is good publicity.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that, like, for Basic Instinct in particular, you understand kind of, like, the knee-jerk reaction to be upset about this movie. Because, like we said, there just wasn't that much mainstream queer content. And especially not that much specifically bisexual focused queer content that was, like, reaching this many eyeballs. You can understand why you'd be like, no, like, the future of how people look at me as a person is, like, tied up in this movie. Kind of, I think that some very obvious differences, notwithstanding the Silence of the Lambs, like, comment that you made earlier, like, has a similarity in terms of, like, the culture was shaped so definitively by Silence of the Lambs and by this movie, and there's like a couple other like big mainstream movies that were dealing with very delicate themes that audiences just did not look at in a critical way. And so it's like, I really do understand that fear and like that pressure that you're under, but I think that, I wasn't cognizant of watching movies in 1992 because I was not alive yet, but when I watched this movie for the first time, I was like, I think this is like a masterpiece.
Well, I think the distinction for me between this movie and Silence of the Lambs is that Silence of the Lambs 100% absolutely paints Buffalo Bill as the villain, no matter what. And I guess you could argue that maybe Basic Instinct does the same thing with Catherine. However, do you want this movie to end with Nick Carran taking down Catherine Chamel?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Yeah,
you do want to watch Silence of the Lambs, and you want to see Jodie Foster take down Buffalo Bill. Like, that is how the movie portrays that. You do not have that here because Nick is a fucking idiot.
Because he's an idiot and he's disgusting as well. Like, how he treats Janine Triplehorn is awful, and like how he treats all women in this movie is like kind of terrible, and like he's a shit person. It's like they're both not great people, and so that's what makes it so much more fun, is like everyone is playing in shades of gray instead of in like a black and white moralistic narrative, and like that's where the juice comes from in this movie.
For sure.
I feel like what's really stuck out to me, and then I promise we will pass it off to Joe. I think what really has stuck out to me on repeat viewings is how empowered Catherine is as a character in basically every scene. Even her moments of weakness are very empowering in that it feels like Jordan said earlier, she understands the social cachet that crying into a man's arms can have for her. And that's what makes the final shot of the movie, I think, so satisfying. Because you're like, she's never been hoodwinked by this man for a single second.
And you have the number of people who misinterpreted that and were like, oh, wait, so is she the killer? Did Nick just leave an ice pick under the bed? Like, oof.
Fun fact, though, so Jerry Goldsmith's score, which was Oscar nominated for this film.
Good score.
It's bombastic as all get out. I liken it to Bernard Herrmann's score for Cape Fear. Like, it's a character in and of itself.
Yes.
But when he submitted the score to Verhoeven was like, I love all of it, except for the last 20 seconds, which was the score that played over the reveal of the ice pick. And he said, it is bombastic, but I want it to be more tragic. I want this to be kind of like a loud, sad reveal for the audience, not a loud, like, oh shit reveal for the audience. And he changed it, and he thought it worked out better.
Interesting. Huh. Okay.
So, anyway, take it away, Joe.
Okay. So, as we mentioned, we do open over credits of fragments or prisms or some shit, and it's people having sex in a mirror over top of the bed, which is like so quintessentially 90s. I love it.
Very much. There's a lot of it. It's this and Bride of Chucky.
I was going to say, and you're going to go with Bride of Chucky.
Classic.
Also a good movie.
For sure. So we have this faceless blonde woman, very strategic, we're getting to see tits, we're getting to see ass, but we're not getting to see face so that we don't know whether or not it's Sharon Stone.
It was. Fun fact. It was her.
It is her?
Yeah, it's her in that scene.
Okay, I was going to say, because admittedly, I have never had hair as long as Sharon Stone while riding Cowgirl on some dude, but it just seems so annoying to have your hair in your face like that as you're riding someone.
Ridiculous. Well, it's like all the blocking of it all. Oh my goodness. How salacious are we getting on Mike? My God.
It's hairography, right? Like, if you're into it, you're not thinking, ooh, my hair's getting into my face. You're like, Jesus, this D.
But, it's getting in her mouth. She's, like, spitting it out. Like, oh.
Well, but it's also, like, Chekhov's pelvic thrust. Because, again, we are teased 2 more times in this movie with Sharon Stone riding Michael Douglas, Cowgirl. And maybe possibly gonna arch her back and like stab him with an ice pick. And I love that we have this opening scene is like, oh shit, like Chekhov's sexual move.
It's so funny.
The like rearing back.
Right. Is she gonna grab it?
Is she gonna break his dick, or is she gonna stab him with her specialty dildo? Yes.
Also, though, I've never noticed it before, but so when she starts stabbing him, it goes through his eye and out his nose.
Brutal.
In a split-second shot, and it is awesome.
It's visceral as fuck.
It's very sexual. It's very orgasmic.
Yes. It's penetrative.
Sex and violence, they're all
connected, baby.
I mean, I do love that this opening sequence, it's literally, hey, what did you come to the movie for? We're giving you sex and death intertwined first 2 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, people's basic instincts are front and center in this entire movie.
Hey.
Leonardo pointing at the screen. He said the title.
As much as I don't really want to give Eszterhas more credit than he deserves, I do think there are so many there are so many elements of the script where you're like,
Yeah.
I mean, those first 2 minutes combined with the title, like, even that in and of itself, you're just like, you know what you're doing.
That cocaine worked, baby.
There we go.
Oh my God.
Him and Stephen King, they've made an empire on it.
And Shane Black, the holy
There we
trinity.
go. Okay, so we are introduced the next morning to San Francisco detectives Nick Curran, played by Michael Douglas, as well as his definitely not in love with him partner, Gus Moran, played by George Dunsta. So they arrive at Johnny Boz's crime scene. So this is the man who was killed. And we're keeping it dirty and salacious because we're looking at both the cum stains as well as the coke residue on the sheets immediately.
Okay, I love that Douglas just goes very impressive when he sees the cum stains. And then it's also residue of coke on his lips and the tip of his penis.
How did that get there?
Oh, it's the back of her throat because when you do coke, it drips down the back of your throat. And
No,
so,
sweetie, I got it.
Okay.
It was a ritual.
Oh, that was amazing. This is the iconic he got off before he got off line. Once again, that's what they pay you the big bucks for.
Right?
Yes.
It's all catchphrases. It's like if Eszterhas was a film critic now, he would just be getting pull quotes all the time.
Correct.
So we're also introduced to several of the male characters in this movie in this opening scene, including Lieutenant Philip Walker, who was played by Dennis Arndt. That's kind of Douglas's boss. And then there's Captain Talcott, who I think is the guy who's just kind of lurking against the wall, and he's played by Chelsea Ross.
Okay.
And none of these people matter.
So this movie is like a smorgasbord of male character actors that I have seen in a million of other movies before.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Chelsea Ross, I was like, where do I fucking know this guy from? He is Christine's dad in Drag Me to Hell.
Oh,
Wow.
fuck. Okay.
Like, he looks like a Bobo Billy Bob Thornton.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
absolute king Wayne Knight.
Wayne Knight sweating in this movie is a character in of itself.
Stephen Tobolowsky coming in.
Yes.
Oh my
Love it.
God, yes.
Mitch
Huge
Pileggi.
Mitch Pileggi. James Rebhorn, who is, I didn't know he was dead, but I always know him from Independence Day, but he has like 50 million like random character actor credits, but he's the guy that is psychologizing Nick after Roxy gets killed in the car crash.
Right.
Yes, yeah. It's a movie of good guys, like faces that we don't see on screen anymore because everyone looks unique and has a bit, and they all work really well.
Yes.
Well, and they're not all, like, traditionally beautiful. Like, again, not to shit on contemporary movies, but these people are not appearing on CW shows or the 1992 equivalent.
Yeah.
Correct.
Fun fact, though, apparently Steven Spielberg watched this movie during pre-production for Jurassic Park and said, that's my Dennis Nedry when he saw Wayne Knight.
So good.
It's the best thing in the world.
The only thing scarier than a dinosaur is Sharon Stone staring you down.
All right, so they zero in on Catherine Trammell, who was the murdered man's girlfriend, fairly quickly. So Nick and Gus go off to interview her, but they go to the wrong house, by which I mean they go to her first house and where they meet her girlfriend, Roxy, who is played by Leilani Sorrell, and she's pretty cool and pretty awesome, and then she's like, you want to go to the beach house. I'm
going to tell you something really funny, is that I forgot this character was in this movie because I haven't seen it in 10 years, and when she walked in, I was like, wow, Sharon Stone looks different.
She looks different. The hair.
I also thought the same thing the first time I watched it. I was like, I did not think that Sharon Stone looked like that, but oh, look at that. They got us all. They tricked us.
Use that magna cum laude brain of theirs.
Well, it's like they walk in and you think, well, where's Sharon Stone? Because we're told this is Catherine's house and we know she's playing Catherine. And then you're just like, oh, yeah, okay, I guess I just got to follow the plot a little bit.
But it is kind of gross so that she's dating someone who looks very similar to her.
Oh, like the queer community?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, what are we doing here?
Accuracy, baby.
Call it homophobic, but it's not a lie.
I mean, Trace, the movie literally opens with them having sex with a mirror above them. So it's like, obviously, Catherine likes looking at herself.
You know, I will say, I thought that I was free from that stereotype, and the first time I ever showed my sister the, like, Instagram account of this very pretty influencer who I had a little bit of a crush on, she was like, bro,
no.
she looks exactly like you.
Telling on myself.
No, but you know, I mean, like, personal question. Do y'all ever, like, looking at yourself in the mirror when you're in flagrante?
In murdering?
Nah, when you're
you know
when
what they're
fucking.
asking. Yes.
Ooh.
I'm revealing far too much on this podcast.
My anecdote was going to be when I was in high school. My boyfriend and I didn't have places that we could just go fool around. So we went to the changing room of I want to say a Macy's or a Foley's.
Oh my god!
And fooled around in there, but I there's a mirror there, so I wound up looking at myself and I was like, oh, this is really fucking hot.
Trace is also a huge narcissist, so this tracks.
Yeah.
I was
basically
gonna say,
his first threesome.
I'm a Leo, and I feel like it really just checks all the boxes.
Mm-hmm.
Really just like show the difference between us, because I'm so deeply insecure that if I like see a mirror, I like run the other way. I'm like, I can't look at myself.
So when we all go to the club together, Brooke and I are going to go hang out on our own.
Yeah, we're gonna have a good time.
Jordan and I will be like, wait, there's a mirror in this room somewhere. We need to hide.
Block it, throw a fucking glass at it. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we head to the beach house, and this is where we are introduced to Catherine herself. And I just immediately, Sharon Stone absolutely commands the screen, but she's not doing this big showy performance. She's very calm. She's very cool. She's calculated, but she's also interacting with Gus and Nick in completely different ways.
Yeah.
She's playing Nick for a fucking fool.
Immediately.
But also just having, I wasn't dating him, I was fucking him. That is, again, not something you would typically see a female character say in a film, especially in 1992.
100%.
And I love, again, I'm not saying that these are inherently masculine characteristics, because again, women should be able to do and say what they want in regards to sex. But in the realm of film and mainstream media, these are absolutely manly, masculine characteristics that are being put in this woman. And I fucking love that. Like, go her. Kill anyone you want.
Absolutely. And like Sharon Stone's performance is absolutely brilliant because she walks such a fine line of being commanding and quote unquote traditionally masculine. I completely agree with like what you just said. And yet she's so flirtatious at the same time. And it's that combination that is like so disarming.
Well, so here's the thing though. So based on the way this movie plays out, I believe that she had been targeting Nick for a very long time. So she had this played out from like probably months ago. The only reason she got with this boss guy and murdered him in San Francisco was to get Nick on the scene.
Yeah.
To fulfill the premise of her book.
Yes.
Right. Well, it's the whole fucking cigarette thing where it's like, oh my god, you don't smoke? Well, guess what? Oh no, I found a cigarette here. Hey, you want to come back to smoking?
She knows what I believe. I mean, I think in a lesser movie or a movie that came out today, we would get a flashback scene that shows her like after her last book just came out, and she's reading the newspaper and she comes across that article about Nick's shooting those tourists.
Right.
And then she gets a light bulb moment.
Wait, pump the brakes. We have not even mentioned that, like the impetus of like his horrible actions that he did off screen that we don't see.
He's the worst. He was fully addicted to coke. He killed people. And what does he get for it? Nothing. Yeah.
Well, that's actually where we start to go, because after this interview, this is when we're introduced to Jean Triplehorn, and she is playing Dr. Beth Gardner, who is his therapist, but he's there for mandated appointments because he needs to be cleared by internal affairs for this shooting. And of course, he's like, oh, well, I'm fucking you, and I've stopped drinking, and I'm not smoking, so clearly I'm cured of all of my ills. Please release me from these meetings.
So
he's working his ass off to get off the sauce.
I think
with
with the claims about misogyny against this film, I think the Jean Triplehorn character is probably the biggest case study for it.
Agreed.
At the same time, I do think it's a case though of the men in the film treating her like this and not the film treating her like this, but I am open to rebuttals for that statement.
As much as I love Verhoeven and I love this film, and I won't go too much into detail unless we want to, but there's like two instances of kind of like, I want to say bad on-set behavior from the creative team, and one of them is the sex scene between Drew.
Oh yeah.
Well, if we even want to call it sex, this is like date rape.
It's a rape.
Yeah.
Like she the subtitle says no.
Like 50 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's awful.
It's really not good, and apparently, like, there was, deliberate miscommunication about how rough that scene would be, and same goes for the infamous Sharon Stone, crossing moment we will, I'm sure, talk about later. But I think that, like, the film, in a certain way, even though I love Jean Trevorrow's performance in this, and I do think that the character of Beth is very interesting and like morally gray and all these really like fascinating ways. Right. The film does, I think, set her up for failure a little bit, and that she doesn't have like quite enough screen time, or just the script doesn't care about her enough to give her an element of proper agency. She's kind of there.
But she's like your secondary femme fatale, because she is meant to be a red herring of sorts. And what my feminist lady says, and I don't really know if I fully buy into this, but what Paulia says in the commentary, she goes, many of the scenes between Beth and Nick that some people have interpreted as misogynistic seem to be closer to Apache dances. So again, I love that we're bringing in like indigenous culture to this.
This is interesting.
She goes, that is where sex war is at its maximum. Love/hate relationships between men and women explodes volcanically. The energy of those scenes, difficult as they are to watch, pours off the screen, and it would be hard to replicate that without that same kind of energy.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's not really a defense in my mind, but more so, I guess, how she's kind of rationalizing her excusing these scenes.
Right. I have an interesting reading that sort of, it doesn't really speak to that, but it does speak to the portrayal of the two main women. So it's by Celestino Deleyto, and it's called The Margins of Pleasure, Female Monstrosity, and Male Paranoia in Basic Instinct from Film Criticism Journal. So Celestino says, she's really drawing on the kind of neo-noir roots of the film. So she says that Catherine is actually presented, most people would go, oh, Catherine, she's a traditional femme fatale, right? But throughout a lot of the film, she's also this kind of long-suffering, honest, submissive woman who offers the male hero the rarely consummated possibility of a stable, uncomplicated relationship. So this idea that Nick has where they're going to settle down, they're going to procreate, and they're going to live happily ever after. Like, that's who she becomes to him. And the film kind of wants to lean into that, even though we're still never sure we can trust Catherine. But then on the flip side, we get Beth, who starts in this sort of virginal role where, she's so kind to Nick and she just wants to help him and be the good wife and that kind of thing. But then the film ends up blaming her for all of these murders and then redefining her as the castrating party. So it kind of flips these conventional representations of two stereotypes and makes both characters dangerously fluctuate between them, and thereby sort of producing a critique of cultural female stereotypes by revealing their instability and unreliability. So that sees it as like a positive that these women are sort of inscrutable and changing their gender roles.
Also very bisexual.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think on that too, like Catherine, there's the whole thing with the quote unquote Rugrats or kids, in that like they come to it twice, and it's like the first time she is down for the Rugrats, and at the end of the movie, it's no Rugrats. Like, it's the relationship is not like a heteronormative perfection idea of like what a mainstream relationship would be. So again, she's like subverting at like these like last minutes, telling him like, no, this is not what we're gonna have, and he's okay with that. So he's like become comfortable with the dynamic and like the shifting power complex that she has.
And however you want to define the last shot of the movie, in my opinion, it's like the ice pick under the bed does not say that she's never going to kill him. It just says that she's not going to kill him tonight. This is very much like she is not a tamed woman by any means.
She's got that ice pick on lock.
Yeah, she's has it at the ready.
I read one review that was like, as long as he keeps giving her orgasm, she will not stab him, because she only really brings it out when she needs that kind of satisfaction, right? Like, that's why we see her get off in this opening scene.
I think it's going to be once her book comes out, she needs a new book idea. Let's get rid of, because, spoiler alert, in Basic Instinct 2, she does mention Nick, but doesn't really allude to what happened to him.
Oh, bummer.
Also, this is not related to anything we've been talking about, but y'all know that really iconic line in Showgirls where she says Versace instead of Versace?
Yes.
Right.
Perfect line, yes.
We do have a line in the earlier scene where the cops are talking about the body, where the one cop is like, the scarf was Hermes. It's expensive.
Yes.
Oh my God. I mean, that's alluding to class to me.
True.
Yeah, yes, definitely.
Well, but
that
it is in
feels like an
Showgirls too, I
Eszterhas
would say.
tick,
Yes,
yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
They're hearing Paul direct and they can't tell over the Dutch accent, and they're like, what does he want us to say? Like,
Hermes.
are we
Is it
talking
Hermes?
about, like, gods? What are we doing?
Yes.
Hermes.
So, at the precinct, after Nick gets out of this meeting with Beth, we get this info dump on Catherine, right? So she's still the prime suspect. She's the person of interest. So they've dug up a bunch of dirt on her, and we, as the audience, get to reap the rewards. So we learn that she went to Berkeley for psychology and English. That she is apparently worth $110 million after her parents' suspicious death. And that she has written a book that is identical to Boz's murder. And I love that this is just like, here's 2 minutes of everything you need to know about this woman. Go.
Yep.
The convolution with all of these murders that Catherine is connected with.
I love it. All she
It's
does is
so
like
great.
commit murders or incite murders around her.
But
Right.
the film, like, it doesn't. I feel like a lesser film would give us these flashbacks, and I'm so fucking happy the movie trusts us to be moderately intelligent to follow along with the film.
To the movie's then ultimate detriment for how audiences then watch the movie and can't
Right.
pick up on those things.
But
you
that
know?
is just too bad.
But that's
Agreed.
Yes.
Oh, completely.
We've mentioned
agree.
media literacy, and it's a thing where, and Joe and I have this discussion all the time, where it's like, how much of the responsibility falls on the film to handhold its audience and be a lecture for them, essentially, and how much of the responsibility falls on the audience to do the work themselves. And I think it's a conversation, it's a debate that's going to be everlasting till the end of time.
Sure.
I very much fall in the people are stupid, they need to do the fucking work themselves camp.
Yeah, I completely agree, because art is not there to, like, deliver a moral diatribe. At least, like, you know, art of this caliber, like we said, movies for adults are not meant to teach you a morally good or a morally bad lesson. They're meant to be a work of art, and you're meant to interpret them.
That is true, but I feel like there's a slight slippery slope when we're talking about things like mysteries and noirs. Like, infamously, there's a Bogey and Bacall film called The Big Sleep, which is based on a Dashiell Hammett novel, and the novel is notoriously difficult to decipher, which therefore produces a notoriously difficult to decipher movie, and you're like, I don't know that anyone could have solved this fucking mystery because you didn't play fair.
Well, but I think there's a difference, though, between convoluted plotting and messaging in a film.
Right.
Oh,
Exactly.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah, you still want to make the highest caliber of movie possible. You want to, you know, be using the art form to give your audience the best experience possible. But you don't need to say what's right or what's wrong.
You have protesters calling this movie biphobic, homophobic, and then you have the director of the film saying this film is pro-gay. So both sides, valid issues with both of them. But again, it's just like, well, okay, what do you make of that, right? Like, how can Verhoeven make his pro-gay stance more clear if that's what his intent is? Or you could say, well, the film doesn't do a good enough job of getting that intent across.
Yeah. I mean, I think that this movie will always have, like, an element of debate to it. And that's why it's so good in a lot of ways. That's why it's so enduring. And I think, like, it lets you draw your own conclusions about it and, like, form your own, basically, like, how empowering do you think this movie is? How like pro-gay do you think it is as an individual? Like, it gives you the space to do that, and I think most good movies should have that space, like, for individuals and not for, like, you know, audience as a whole, but for, like, individual to individual.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why I often get frustrated with people when they take opinions of films from hearsay, like from secondhand sources or something. So, you know, not to circle back to the critic debate, but especially when people say, oh, well, this movie's biphobic, so I'm not going to watch it. And you're like, okay, but no, you need to watch it so you can make up your own informed opinion.
Right.
If anything, that makes me want to watch it more, to be like, how is it biphobic?
I want to know.
Right. No, exactly.
But it also sounds like all four of us appreciate like challenging material. And I don't know. I mean, I think we all have like very strong convictions and want to debate and have conversation about it. And I appreciate that some people are like, oh, I just need to know if a film is going to waste my time or make me angry. So that is also fair.
Yeah.
I would not be in this business if I did not want to engage critically with movies.
Yeah.
We'd all have very boring podcasts, wouldn't we?
Yes.
Okay, so speaking of weird decisions that this movie makes, so they're like, we need a psychological profile of who this Catherine woman is, and instead of just having Beth Garner do this,
she needs a man.
This is where we bring in, I mean, I think again you could read this as part of the critique or the commentary on like female roles, male roles, and so on. But enter Stephen Tobolowsky so that he can say.
Plus.
There's two possibilities. The writer is either a psychopathic killer who planned the murder years in advance, or someone is setting them up.
So I will say this, though. I mean, in defense of her bringing in Tobolowsky to do this for her, I would argue it's premeditated on her part because she knows that she has a history with Catherine and doesn't want that to compromise the investigation later.
At least not yet.
Not yet.
Later on, she'll get over that.
But also, she's like, can I bring in character actor Stephen Tobolowsky? And like the answer should be yes.
Yes,
always. Like, what are you doing? Yeah, you have the choice. You do it. Come on.
When he fucking showed up in Veronica Mars season 2, I was just like, yes.
See, for me, he's Freaky Friday, Lindsay Lohan's awful math teacher.
A classic.
Oh, classic. But hey, so no shade to Stephen Tobolowsky or his physical traits. I've never found him particularly attractive. However,
how is that relevant?
But the relevance is that in this scene, I found him very attractive, and I don't know why.
Okay.
Psychological competency, a real turn on over here.
Well, I mean, he's actually smart in this, whereas I feel like in most appearances, he often plays this kind of befuddled.
Yeah. I always associate him with Thelma and Louise immediately. So.
Okay.
Groundhog's Day, you know.
I also was a very big One Day at a Time fan, which he's amazing in. So.
Oh my god, yes, because he dates Rita Moreno.
I forgot he's in that.
Yeah, he and Rita Moreno, a power couple.
Is that a hot couple?
Brooke, I will tell you this right now, that when that show was canceled and then renewed and then canceled again.
It was a roller coaster. Whirlwind.
It was horrible. But yeah, Stephen Tobolowsky, he played Justina Machado's boss, who wound up dating her mother, Rita Moreno, in One Day at a Time, and it was great.
Yeah, it's a great show. Highly recommend. If you want something a little lighter after the insanity that is Basic Instinct, just throw on One Day at a Time. You'll have
it's
a
queer.
great time.
And
it's super queer.
Very queer. Yeah.
One Tobolowsky at a time.
Yep.
And with that, we move on. Okay, so we get possibly the most artistically lit scene in this movie when we get to this walk and talk to the elevator where, yes, we are introduced to Wayne Knight's John Corelli. I couldn't figure out if he's like from the DA's office. Who could care? This is his like basically one big sequence.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want Catherine to be brought in, but Nick already has a read on her. So he thinks he knows exactly how she's going to react. So they're like, cool, okay, fine, bring her in. So they go to pick her up at the beach house. This is when we notice that, she's collecting all kinds of information on him already. And of course, she is very comfortable changing into something more comfortable in front of him.
This is hot.
It is. Can't lie. And I mean, this outfit, so iconic. Forever.
The iconic, right?
Yeah.
So she's got the hair up in the bun. It's a very sort of like tightly controlled. This movie wants to engage with very light BDSM, but the bun to me is like, whoo, she's in control.
Because there's a lot of, because Verhoeven was doing his Hitchcock in this movie. Like, he's doing a lot of Hitchcock. And feel like the outfit and the hairstyle that she puts on for this interrogation scene, I feel like he's doing Tippi Hedren from The Birds.
I was going to say, like, Kim Novak.
Yeah,
maybe so, yeah.
Because, I mean, I'm a big noir fan, but, like, if you look at noir, so much of it is set in San Francisco, like, neo-noir and noir itself, and, like, there's so many pulls of this movie just, like, referencing past noirs, and so, and Vertigo is, like, you know, that quintessential one, so I feel like if you, like, cast her in a green light in this movie, it would look like, you know, Kim Novak stepping out, you know?
100%.
Yeah.
I will keep this very quick, but like erotic thrillers as kind of like the follow-up to noir and being like a type of neo-noir themselves is so interesting to me because noir, like traditional noir, is about the underbelly of American society. And it was kind of like about people's secretive, like not socially acceptable desires. And erotic thrillers are almost completely the same thing, where again, it's the sex and violence like tangled up together. And I think that it's just so smart to connect the two and have them be like genres that sit side by side.
Well, but also erotic thrillers are allowed to now, because of the time period, give that sexuality that noirs weren't allowed to do at the time.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's why Brian De Palma and, our boy here get it, because they're just like, y'all want the underlying sex that's been there in a noir.
It's always
we
been
got
there.
you. Here
100%.
it is.
Yeah.
So, okay, one thing, and then we'll go back to Joe. But, like, whenever the partner gets killed in the elevator, was that not a direct homage to Dress to Kill?
Has to be.
I think so.
Yeah.
It has to be, right? So he's doing...
And I have a read for that.
He's doing Hitchcock and De Palma doing Hitchcock.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're 3 layers deep, baby. We gotta get to the 4th.
Well, and don't forget that this also intersects with queerness, right? Like
Mhm.
No,
San
exactly.
Francisco, the gay mecca on the West Coast, but
Yeah.
also so much queerness embedded in these with like characters who are sort of like sexually fluid or challenging gender normativity and so on.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so we picked up Catherine, and now we get this fantastic car ride scene where, again, she's flirting with Nick, she's antagonistic with Gus, talking about how she's a great liar because that's what book authors have to be, and this fucking shit with the cigarette. My favorite line reading in this entire movie is when she just goes, "It won't last."
Well, also, so because by this time, the anti-smoking campaign had really, really, really taken off. So by having Catherine be
she's a villain.
Well,
So she smokes.
It's not that she's a villain. It's more so that she's going against societal norms by doing something that society says is wrong.
And look, as a person who has never once in their life had one puff of a cigarette, there is nothing cooler on screen than when someone smokes. Like, it is just an inherently true cinema trope. So, even if you're a villain and you're smoking, you still look fucking cool
and sexy.
Like, come on.
Back when I was a regular smoker, if I saw someone smoking in a movie, I was like, fuck, I need a cigarette, right now. Immediately.
I feel like the cigarette industry is like, cool, mission accomplished. We did it, Joe.
Oh, for sure. But hey, look, I am of the mindset that I make my own decisions, and if I die of lung cancer, that is absolutely my fault.
No.
You don't think it's my choice to keep smoking cigarettes?
I think they have highly addictive properties that make you think you have a choice in it.
But that's any drug.
Yes, but they will all harm you and possibly kill you.
Look,
Sure.
all I want to say is, Trace, don't die, though. Don't.
Right?
We want you.
Well, the good news
baby.
is I don't smoke cigarettes regularly anymore. I only smoke them when I drink.
Ask him how often he drinks.
You can
Let's
kill
move
2
on.
vices in one.
No.
Quick, cold
Look.
turkey.
When I was 19, I was a pack a day, and now I'm a pack a month.
That's good.
Very good.
Exactly. So it's fine.
Progress.
Better, you're doing better than Michael Douglas.
Michael Douglas
There
is
we go.
fucking
Don't
freaking
smoke,
out
children.
here.
Right. For all of our underage listeners,
We
first,
don't.
what are you
Okay,
doing?
what are you doing?
Okay, let's get to this interrogation scene. So this is being conducted in apparently the spottiest lighting basement ever. I love it.
Well, what is this architecture in this interrogation room? What police station has this?
Yeah.
An aesthetic
it looks
one.
like Blade Runner.
Yes.
It is like a sci-fi setting.
Mm-hmm.
Paul's like, this is what the American police departments look like.
It honestly kind of feels that, right? Like someone who's never been inside a police precinct is like, oh, it must be lit with shadows. Yes.
Right.
Why are we all doing bad accents?
Oh, Jordan's Verhoeven impression
I love
is
it.
a constant in any movie, and sometimes movies where we're not even covering Verhoeven.
Of course.
So it was
we're
bound
talking
to happen.
happiest season. Oh my god, it's the way the lesbians into Christmas.
Yes. I'm gonna...
Oh, Verhoeven loved Happiest Season.
Oh,
Yeah.
he loved it. He's thinking up his sequel now. There's a lot you can do with Christmas decor.
Right.
He's thinking of a movie in which Kristen Stewart goes and kills her wife and runs away with
Yes.
Aubrey Plaza.
I mean,
And we
I
all
would
cheer
watch
for
it.
her.
Can't lie, I would be there.
No, but that's lesbiophobic. It's anti-lesbian because we have a lesbian killer in the movie.
Boo.
Oh my gosh. I'm so happy to leave that movie behind because, was not a fan. Anyway, okay, so let's get to the most infamous scene of all. And yes, we can acknowledge that Sharon Stone was lied to, or there's a lot of contention around how this scene came about. But yes, we do get the infamous pussy shot as she uncrosses her legs.
I think the important thing, and look, I am not excusing anything Verhoeven did, because look, I'm going to believe Sharon Stone in this scenario, but here's the thing. Both of them are fine with each other. This literally has amounted to a disagreement that neither one of them really cares about.
Right.
Yeah, it's sort of all well and good now, which is good.
And look, I'm not a famous actress. I am not in the position Sharon Stone would have ever been in. And I understand. There's a big issue of consent here.
Mm-hmm.
I lack modesty to the point where I wouldn't personally care if this were happening to me, but I realize that I'm also a 33-year-old gay man living in the year 2022, and I'm not a movie star.
I think it's just about, like, if she had the power, like, I think it's, like, ultimately boiled down to, like, there was a quote where she said, like, she doesn't mind that the shot's in the movie, it's just that she wanted to have the power to, like, have the shot in the movie and, like, have the authority of it. Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's really where it kind of boils down to now, which is, like, I think also, you know, not to have this be about, like, oh my god, like, what we should talk about, but it is, like, such a potent issue nowadays, and, like, making sure that people do have the right to, like, choose what we see on screen and not being exploited by, you know, powerful male directors and everything. But that's a conversation for a whole different thing. But
no, it's just that you want to have autonomy, the same amount of autonomy in every moment, even if you've agreed to, you know, a full frontal nudity clause or whatever it is. But I think that, like, definitely it being very well documented that the two of them have, like, made up and there was never any like long-term ill will makes this much more palatable to talk about.
Yeah.
Like, was this great? No, but is it all fine now, and have we, like, for all intents and purposes learned our lesson? Yes.
I do. Verhoeven very, very much comes across as more of the bad guy here.
Oh, certainly.
I was fascinated reading Stone's quote, though, that was very much like but I think it makes the movie better. Because this really is a power play, because the thing is this, when she uncrosses her legs and flashes her vulva to these men, they all lose their shit.
Yes.
Then they immediately, like, you know, she lights a flame to be like, I've got you, motherfuckers. And they all have to do this thing. They're like, they have to, like, reset the room to reestablish their dominance in the scenario, because her making this move made her the dominant person in this interrogation scene.
Yeah. It's so rare that you see a female character who understands sexuality this intimately, because there are so many female characters that are like, oh, she uses her sexuality as a weapon, but no, I have yet to see a female character on screen that does it in a mainstream film, that does it this intentionally and with such a degree of precision. It's not just about being sexy, it's specifically about the small actions that she's doing.
100%.
And that's why we talk about, you know, when people talk about misogyny, you know, that is men hating women. And I don't view any of this movie as men hating women, be it the characters or the creators. I view it more as men fearing women. And that, to me, is not misogyny.
Oh, sure.
That's just how it should be. Sorry. No, but I completely agree. It's a degree of, like, you know, you hate what you fear, you fear what you hate. Like, if something is dangerous to you, you should be combative towards it, because it means that, like, that thing can overtake you, and in this case, it's powerful women.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing hotter than a powerful woman, also.
Could not agree more.
Come on, fellas.
Well, that one of the things I like the most about this scene, too, is, I mean, we haven't really talked about how this movie is basically the male gaze embodied, right? So there's a lot of, like, lecherousness. It's from the perspective of most of these men, but in this scene specifically, Verhoeven shoots it so that everybody's, like, leaning forward, and you can see that it's almost, like, combative, right? Like, the men, they're also trying to, like, push their bodies closer to her, and she's drawing them in, but also then she's using it in such a way to say, like, I do have the power. The uncrossing the legs, the lighting makes it so that we can barely see her at times, and then she uses the cigarette to illuminate her face and so on. And I love that the movie understands how much of a power play this is, but also that Like, we understand implicitly as the audience that she is fully in control of this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how choreographed it is. I love all the camera zooms in this scene and just how designed the scene is as a whole. It really reflects like the power dynamics that are at play.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, 100%. I will say, having just talked about Suspiria, the 2018 film last month, I really picked up on the line when she says, I like hands and fingers. And I was like, that is such a, like, lesbian bisexual thing to say.
Of course.
I wrote that down as well. It's a great line.
Okay, so after all of this, they're still not sure if they can trust or believe her, so they make her take a polygraph test, which she passes easily. And of course, we're all like, well, yeah, she does.
Duh.
Because she's so cool.
That's movie logic, though, right?
Oh, yeah. Either that or she, like, did it for a book one time and she knows how to pass.
I mean, this movie is operating on a logic that, like, does not exist in human form. Like, if you were a 1/100th competent, like, detective, you would be, oh, she did it. Case closed. Here we go. But Nick is like, I have an erection, so, like, let me see where this goes.
Exactly.
And just follows his dick.
So apparently the passing of the polygraph, though, is, and I don't know how accurate this is, but this is in the bonus features of the film, it's a trait of sociopathy. Because, again, a whole thing of a lie detector test is that your heartbeat, raises when you tell a lie.
Empathy.
Whereas if you're a sociopath, you don't have that issue, quote unquote, because you don't think what you're doing is wrong.
Mm-hmm. Right. And you don't have normal emotional reactions to things either.
Right.
So.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And the funny thing is that Catherine sees a kinship in Nick. So, like, when he offers to drive her home and it's raining, so it's, like, sexy and sultry out, she actually says, oh, I guess we both got away with this because you got away with your murder and I guess I just got away with mine. He's like, wait, what? And then she's like, okay, bye. Thanks for the ride. So Nick immediately goes to this cop bar. He begins drinking. So, okay, that's one vice back. And this is when we're introduced to Marty Nielsen from Internal Affairs, and he is played by Daniel Von Bargen.
Hey, wait, Joe, what do you know this man from?
Lord of Illusions, obviously.
Oh my god, I'm literally like, it's The Faculty, but you're totally right, it's Lord of Illusions.
I mean, also The Faculty, yes. But. So this dude shows up basically to antagonize him, and then he drags Beth into it because she's also there. So they're like, cool, fuck off, and then they leave together so that they can go fuck, and then unfortunately this is our rape scene.
Yes.
I get why you're saying unfortunately. However, I do think that this is a very keen eye into Nick as a character and reinforces the fact that he is a huge piece of shit. So while I obviously do not like seeing Gene Triplehorn in this scenario at all because I love Gene Triplehorn, it is very telling as to how much of a piece of shit this character is.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a reason this scene exists. It's just one of those where you're like, oh, okay, and here's the sexual assault.
Well, but here's the thing, too. So apparently, I mean, Gene Triplehorn has said, in the script it didn't read as brutal as that. Supposedly, what wound up in the final cut of this film was a rehearsal that Douglas and Triplehorn were doing that was filmed.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's it. Like, that's it.
Yeah. It's not great. I think it's probably one of the things that has aged the worst, but I agree with you on kind of like what it says about Nick's character.
I mean, I do think it's necessary if we want to view him in a certain light. And to me, I think that is necessary for this film. So, again, while I'm not saying, like, could we have been like, oh yeah, we can have a scene later where she tells him, hey, that last night you fucked me, but it was really, you raped me. Yes, but again, that's where we get kind of into the debate of how necessary is it to show as opposed to tell rape in movies, Yeah,
and again, it's like this movie from 92 that is, kind of dealing with this sort of stuff. I think you were never going to get anything like that.
Yeah.
And I don't think it prevents me from, liking this movie. It just kind of, again, sign of the times.
Yeah.
Is what it is.
I think it also, it sets up a pattern of behavior where Nick gaslights her into thinking that she loves him and that he cares about her so that she keeps doing, favors for him politically and professionally. So this is basically the first instance where we think, oh, she should not be okay with this because he's horrible to her.
Yeah.
And it establishes this pattern where throughout the film, she will apologize to him for all the shitty things he does to her.
So what I didn't get this in the film, but so after, he thinks that she's given his information to Nielsen, who gave it to Catherine, whatever.
Right.
And she says to him, oh, it's fine. I'm a big girl. I can take it. And then the camera follows her. She goes to her car and we see her demeanor change.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently that was meant to signify she's duplicitous. She is not truthful. She might be a villain. And I read it as,
that's
no,
not how I read it.
That is not how I read that at all.
I'm like, oh, this emotionally vulnerable woman is having a partial breakdown.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I think, again, this is a difference, kind of like what you were just saying, Brooke. It's a difference in the way that we read films nowadays because we are trained to empathize with these female characters. Like, I think this movie in 1992 played to a lot of straight men and were like, you should be cheering for Nick. Nick is the protagonist of this movie. And I look at this movie and I'm like, Catherine Trammell is the protagonist of this
could not
movie.
agree more.
100%.
But the movie, in many ways, the movie kind of has to have a read where Nick is the person that you're following because that is what makes it successful.
Right.
Yeah, because we're building to a twist.
Right.
And does Basic Instinct 2, does that then frame her as is she the protagonist lead? Yeah, okay, so there's your error is she is way more interesting as a character as the person that we're investigating. Who is this mysterious woman versus are I into this world,
So I want to bring in this quote then about the inherent quote unquote misogyny of the femme fatale, and this is from Palia on this commentary. But she says, one of the most vexed issues of contemporary feminism is that of the moral status and meaning of the femme fatale figure that is the image of the woman fatal to man. The overwhelming majority of feminist theorists want to call the femme fatale, or vamp, a misogynist libel against women. These are symptoms to them of male hatred of women, the war with women that's been going on for thousands of years. Palia feels that the femme fatale figure of legend, myth, and popular culture tells the truth about sexual relations. It's about male fear of woman, not male hatred of woman. The femme fatale shows that in her supernatural kind of power, that woman is ultimately unknowable, not only to man, but to herself. Most feminists today are obsessed with the success in the career world, don't want to think that woman has any special connection to nature by virtue of her reproductive apparatus, meaning her uterus. Palia feels that when the femme fatale is thrown out of the canon of modern popular culture, we lose an enormous amount of the voltage between the sexes that made some of the great films so powerful in the studio era. The origins of the femme fatale go all the way back to prehistory, myths like Medusa or the succubus. There are so many images of these figures worldwide, so how could they be coming from false social indoctrination? Surely these vampire motifs are being generated automatically in culture after culture around the world by the basic facts of male and female anatomy. That is, that every time a man has sex with a woman, he is approaching his site of origins. Therefore, he is always subconsciously a fear that as he puts his essence of his sexual being, or his erect member, into the body of a woman, that she might take it, and he might never get it back again, or he might shrink down to a baby again and be reabsorbed into the feminine matrix.
Jesus Christ.
I love that.
There's a lot there.
There's a lot to unpack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I am very interested though in this idea that if a woman is enjoying sex, that is dangerous in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing scarier than a woman being in control of herself.
Mm-hmm.
And how it's not a bad thing to engage with men while being in control of your sexuality.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm a bit flummoxed because I've never seen, and this is me personally speaking, I've never seen a reading from a woman who defines herself as feminist who reads the femme fatale as inherently misogynistic. I've only ever heard the femme fatale as a representation of male anxieties about women's power. So that kind of threw me off a little bit. I wasn't exactly sure where she was drawing that from.
Right.
I mean, the rest of it is men are afraid of women, especially strong women, and it's always been the case throughout history.
But maybe it's that we have this queer bisexual woman as the femme fatale, who also is actually the killer in the film that's muddying the waters a bit.
Yeah.
And also, for every kind of like, the femme fatale is drawn from male anxieties. There is kind of like the male perspective on that, which is misogynistic, because men being anxious about powerful women is inherently misogynistic. The question is like whether you want to read the characters through a positive lens or a negative one. And I think that with sort of like queer or bisexual femme fatales, there's sort of an added element of danger, which is this woman does not need you to satisfy her. She can be satisfied elsewhere.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which is scary too, man. Like, men fear not, like, that's why, like, within any sort of like queerness is like, oh, you're not abiding to my idea of sexuality. I can't control you. Like, we don't have a grasp on what this is, this foreign concept, which is inherently like a scary thing. And that's why, like, queer communities have been marginalized for fucking decades and generations.
If you don't need me as a man for sex, what do you need me for?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I feel like we see that in this movie, interestingly enough, we're up to the part where he follows her to Hazel's house. So Hazel Dobkins, played by Dorothy Malone, she's one of several murderous women that Catherine surrounds herself with. And I feel like Nick spends a large portion of the back half of the movie trying to understand, like, why do you surround yourself with this woman, with Roxy, and so on? And it's like, it's because you don't understand women. And I think in particular case, you don't understand this queer woman who finds a sense of comfort in other women who are not afraid of being transgressive and pushing boundaries.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Any thoughts, by the way, about the way that Verhoeven shoots that car chase? Because I fucking loved it.
Hilarious.
Heart
A+.
Like,
in the best way.
This scene I don't think needs to be in this movie,
No.
but I'm glad it is.
I was like, can Verhoeven direct like Fast 11? Because
I mean, y'all, I think Verhoeven's in his 80s now. I'm like terrified, like whatever the last movie he made, which is Benedetta right now, but like it's always going to be his last movie.
Right?
Yeah.
So many bangers.
If I was in my 80s, I'd be retired. I'm sorry. Like, I would not be making movies still.
I will continue to hold out hope. But he has a pretty good catalog, so there's plenty of rewatch material.
For him to crank out Benedetta now, A+ material on him.
Pretty legendary.
I mean, after L, too, because L is like...
I love L.
Oh, so good.
It's super controversial, folks. In case.
Oh yeah, sorry. If you content warnings for
Jordan.
sexual assault, among other things, in L.
Just a few.
Just go watch it and draw your own conclusions, and then
right? Yes, challenging material begs to be seen by folks.
Yeah, very much so. That is a conversation piece if I've ever seen one.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah.
You know what's a conversation piece in this?
What's that?
The Bart Simpson keychain.
Hey, we're not there yet. Don't
Oh my God.
spoil.
I was going to talk about when Nick falls asleep to Hellraiser.
Also true.
Okay, so we're up to the part where Nick starts to slowly lose his mind. He realizes that Catherine has gotten access to his files because she knows about his coke habit, the internal affairs investigation, and also his wife's death by suicide?
A plot point that I had completely forgotten about.
Because it comes to nothing.
Well, at the time when this was coming out, people that were against this film were like, you have another film with Michael Douglas as this fucking sexist womanizer.
Mm-hmm.
At least in Fatal Attraction, you had the Anne Archer character as his wife who was like balancing some of this out. But this one, you just removed the wife, which makes it inherently more bad, I guess, in some people's eyes. At the same time, why is this even a plot point? Just don't have this ex-wife, this dead wife in the movie.
Gotta have a dead wife.
Christopher Nolan's thrilled about this one.
It's like the Eszterhas checklist. Okay, we've got to have way too many men in here, maybe a dead wife, and copious amounts of coke.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Do y'all think they were just doing cocaine on this movie?
Had to have been.
Yes.
I love the lack of a pause. You're just like, yes.
Absolutely. 100%.
This is not a movie you make with a clear head, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Could not be made today.
No.
Definitely not. And that's why we love it.
So I'm curious, because we do have this moment where he learns all this stuff from Catherine, and then he storms out, but before he leaves, that's when Roxy kind of struts in, and they begin this very male gazy, for the camera, performative kind of makeout session. And I'm interested, how do you two feel about the depiction of actual bisexual sex in this movie? Because we don't get much more than this, do we?
Yeah, there's just the makeout and the boob grab, and then there's a little bit of them, I think, in the bathroom of
She closes
the
the
club.
stall.
Yeah.
I think that's the sexiest part.
Yes.
It's so hot.
Oh.
As a bisexual woman, I was a big fan.
And they're doing coke, and she just shuts the door in his face. Ugh.
Lovely. I don't know. I don't mind it because, again, it's like the movie very much has its cake and eats it too, because every sort of like male gazy performative thing that Catherine does, we get a sense that she's doing because she knows that it's male gazy and performative.
Right.
And she and Roxy are so clearly into, again, sort of like a bad bisexual stereotype, but like they're into the threesomes. Like, oh, she can join us sometime, etc., etc. Like, they're showing off for Nick. And Catherine is, again, using that as like, I don't need you to fuck me. I'm good. So, I don't know. I like it. I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think if anything, like, I feel bad for Roxy because Roxy sort of gets short-shifted in this, but like, I don't think the depiction is necessarily like ill or not. I think if anything, like, it sort of just boils down to like how we feel about the representation as a whole, you know, like, and how this just is like one piece of the larger bisexual puzzle that this movie is like crafting.
But I also view this like club as like, it's like Catherine is like this queen of the queer underworld in this club. It's
yes.
a little bit
kind of awesome.
And Nick stands out like a fucking sore thumb.
Yeah, Nick does not belong here at all. He is too vanilla for this shit.
Don't go to a club in a sweater, sir. What are you
just don't
doing?
do it.
Unless it's Fright Night. I need to reiterate this. He literally looks like Chris Sarandon in Fright Night.
But isn't Fright Night set? Is it in Chicago or Detroit?
Or at least it's cold.
No, it's like a small town, like around Los Angeles, isn't it?
Oh shit! I was gonna say, well, at least because this one's like San Francisco. Like, no, it's not cold there, sir. Don't do that. But never mind.
Kind of nippy in San Francisco.
Yeah. I mean, it's the cold part of
Colder
California,
part of
but
California.
still, that does not excuse the fashion choice.
Yeah.
All the people from San Francisco are going to be like emailing us and saying, actually it gets super fucking cold when the fog rolls in.
I was gonna say, the
When
wind
the fog
and the
rolls
rain.
in.
Trace, yes. Do you know how much fog comes off the bridge? A lot.
Copious amounts of fog and copious amounts of cocaine.
Boom.
You can't tell the
That's
difference
my favorite
between
kind
the
of
two.
setting.
God. Okay, so we did jump ahead, but basically I don't know. I find the back part of this film, it sort of loses me when we move away from the Catherine Nick stuff and we start to move more into the Beth as a potential alternative killer, and his career is spiraling. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, the scene where he finger bangs Catherine as Roxy desperately tries to like look over that dude's shoulder in the club is really interesting. I think it's important for our queer reading that we kill Roxy very shortly after so that we can remove one obstacle to a traditional heterosexual romance.
Sorry, so again, if you're talking about biphobia or like queer homophobia in this movie, it really is, okay, Roxy is so jealous that... see, I read this more as Roxy's possessive of Catherine as a partner, not as a, oh, this man is threatening my lesbianism with this woman. And I think that you can read it that way, but I don't get that impression from Roxy.
Yeah, I think, again, this is where I think the screenplay kind of, like, gets the movie in trouble. There's, like, the sort of gross Michael Douglas, oh, let's talk man-to-man line.
Ooh, but that's him! That's the character!
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely. But, you know, because he is the framework for which we're viewing this movie, I think, again, it's, like, it is sort of like a catch-22 where you understand that we're looking at a character, but we're also, you know, looking at the framework of this movie. Again, it doesn't bother me, but I can see how it would bother. I see how there's a reading where you're like, yeah, that's not great. Personally, I don't really mind it. I think, like, this movie is in a particular zone, and it doesn't really stray from that zone. Obviously, you can nitpick it to death, but...
I think, at the end of the day, once you get to the end of the movie, because again, we have that whole scene where Sharon Stone is like visibly upset over Roxy's death.
Yeah.
Right.
Do y'all think that is a genuine performance from Catherine, or do you think that's an act?
I think it's genuine, honestly.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's genuine, but that she understands the effect it's going to have on
Yes.
her.
Yeah.
Interesting. See, I don't want to say I disagree, but I had a different read of it. I had it as no, she is playing everyone, and Roxy is just another pawn in her game.
I mean, you can totally see that. There's totally a world in which that's true, and there's totally a world in which, it's not true. And I think that's, kind of the majesty of Catherine as a character, is that she is so unscrutable, and that we actually, by the end, still don't know everything about her, and she does keep us guessing. And I think that's why she's so fascinating, is because you spend these 2 hours watching and, trying to investigate this character. Is this the killer? And yes, you obviously find out, she did it. But, we still don't really know much about her, and what is making her tick, and, her bisexuality is still a mystery, and, that's kind of fun, and, her as, this object of just success and, power is, cool to, witness, so.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it funny where, as queer people, we watch these movies and we think, oh, we want not necessarily better representation, but, I watch this movie and think, I wish that I could get a bit more Roxy. I'd like to know more about her. She seems like an interesting character, or even just an interesting foil for Nick as our protagonist. And yet at the same time, Jordan, you just said, oh, it's like a puzzle, and we get to sort of sift through the pieces and decide what we like and what we don't like. And isn't that enjoyable? And isn't that a different kind of experience? And I think that's what makes me appreciate the film.
Yeah, why not both? To be completely sincere, this is one of my favorite queer movies.
But that's Joe. That's when we get into the Silence of the Lambs conversation, where it's both you and I don't know how y'all feel, Brooke and Jordan, but Joe and I both love Silence of the Lambs.
Huge
but
fans.
we are aware and we acknowledge its transphobic tendencies and the ripple effect it had on society.
Yes.
And I think the same thing can be said about this, even though I do think that this film is less egregious in its homophobia than Silence of the Lambs is about its transphobia. But again, it's the thing about we can acknowledge these things and still like the movies we're talking about.
Yes.
And this is sort of a fun queer power that we have as, queer creatives, is that I'm I see, this is a movie that I could be offended by, but I could also be I fucking love this movie. And no one can tell me that I can't love this movie, because I am the targeted part of it. But specifically for Basic Instinct, so that's why I'm I'm a huge fan, and no one can
as
tell
a
me I'm
bisexual
wrong.
woman.
Yes,
don't fucking tell me what I can and cannot like about Basic Instinct. Well, as a gay man, can I offer an interesting reading I had literally never considered until this rewatch?
Yes.
Please.
Okay, so before Roxy tragically bites it in her exciting car derailment, we do have this moment where Nick goes to meet Gus, and Gus is drinking. He's clearly drunk, and he's warning Nick, stay away from Catherine. I don't think she's good for you. And this was the first time that it ever occurred to me that Gus is totally in love with Nick. And then I was happy to see that I am not alone in this reading. So I'm going to bring back Celestino. And she says, Gus is Nick's only friend, the only one who supports him when nobody else believes he is innocent. Gus constantly tries to remind his friend that Catherine is guilty and that he is letting his attraction for her spoil his professional detachment. Gus's aggressiveness towards Catherine is expressed through continuous offensive references to her lethal sexual organ, suggesting the sexual nature of his jealousy and his perception of her as a rival. He himself confesses to Nick that he does not like women. And then finally, the fun little kicker, which you would have to know based on where this movie was shot, is that this scene in particular was filmed at a country and western bar called Rawhide 2, which is a popular gay and lesbian restaurant, which has since tragically closed.
Interesting.
I think for whatever reason I did know that this scene was filmed at a gay and lesbian bar restaurant, and I mean, if you've listened to 5 minutes of the Queer Quadrant, you know that we're huge fans of this person is in love with this other person read. But I do think it makes sense, particularly with how much he talks about Catherine's pussy. Let's just say
this is when we get the magna cum laude pussies done fried up your brain line, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Isn't he wearing? He's wearing a cowboy hat.
He's wearing a
Pretty
cowboy
much
hat, which is like queer coding.
Yeah, that's
So is Beth the summa cum laude pussy?
the secondary.
Sure.
but not
Did
as
anyone
much
graduate
point
with the
as good.
GED? What are we talking about? Like, what are the degrees we're getting?
Do they
That's
offer those
Roxy.
at Berkeley?
That's Roxy.
Yeah. I love that read. Huge fan.
Yeah,
that's
no,
good.
that's awesome. I mean, look, there's nothing straight about cowboy core, so
This is true.
You know.
So Roxy is now dead, so we've removed one obstacle towards Nick and Catherine getting together. Gus will be the other one later on in our diploma elevator kill. But we also have to introduce our big red herring, which is that Beth had a husband that she maybe murdered and that she was obsessed with Catherine when they were at Berkeley. I did love that Catherine's description of Lisa Oberman, oops, I meant Lisa Hoberman, is basically the plot of Single White Female.
Well, okay, wait. So, do y'all believe that Beth, aka Lisa Hoberman, was actually obsessed with Catherine Trammell?
How could we know?
How could you know? How could you know?
That's the thing. That's the thing. This movie leaves so much up to the audience to surmise themselves. And again, to me, maybe the optimist that I am, I'm like, no. In my mind, that is not the case. Now, do I think that they had a sexual relationship and that maybe Beth was like confused and coming to terms with it? Yes, absolutely. And I guess I liken it to myself in high school. You know, the first guy that I ever dated in high school, I could have been deemed obsessed with him because I was like, oh, I'm gay. This might be the only guy I ever meet in my entire life who also likes me. So again, there are so many things about Beth's history that are not said in this movie that I empathize with because I'm filling in a lot of the blanks myself.
Sure.
But that is falling into, again, the viewer's life experiences, filling in what you know about Beth's backstory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Honestly, I love the idea of like the sapphic duality there, but also like, honestly, Beth is probably so overwhelmed by how good Catherine was fucking that she was like, that was like the best fuck of my life. I don't know what to do with myself now. So like, if she became a little obsessive, like, sure, I get it, girl, why not?
I do love her delivery of, what was I supposed to say? Hey guys, I'm not gay, but I did fuck your suspects.
Yes.
But also, girl, you're a little gay. It's fine.
Right?
Oh, she's gay.
That to me is the biggest like 1992-ness of this
Well,
stuff
I'm
is
not
where
gay.
she's like, I was
just
embarrassed.
experimented
Right.
in college.
It was just a one-time thing.
Wait. Because I do think, I mean, look, not to come down on all of you, but I do think that no, I think it belittles or it shames experimentation. Because I think you can be straight and still want to experiment with members of the same sex.
I do agree. However, I think that I've maybe, again, this is a little bit of a sticky area. But
No, go ahead.
I think there are very many more bisexual people in the world than they think there are. And to me, although like I think experimentation is great and you should obviously like do whatever you feel called to, you might be a little more bisexual than you think you are.
Right.
Well, but I think that's even though putting a label. I mean, again, you can just say, I like people.
That's
Well,
also
I
fine.
think that's
You
the
might
thing
be a
is,
little
I think
more
people,
queer.
right?
Than
People
you think you
are so
Mhm.
bound to labels, and I think like you look at when this movie was made, and like just the conversations around sexuality and like experimentation and everything. I think it's just very emblematic of the time.
Yes.
Like I
Yes.
think that like we as a culture aren't open to discussing sex and these things in a comfortable manner, so people don't have the language or the ability to feel comfortable talking about these things and actually parsing through maybe where they feel or what they land or where, you know, like we just don't have that discourse and like aren't as a culture built that way.
Yeah.
So,
And, you know, sort of like the spectrum should continue to expand so that it doesn't feel like you do have to put a label on it. Or that
Right.
but you know, you don't have to regress either and be like, I'm straight, I just experimented a little.
I guess I was so used to, maybe y'all feel similar, I was so used to growing up in a world where it was like, oh, if you even thought about doing something with a guy if you were a man, then that automatically made you gay. It's like, no, it doesn't make you gay.
You were Kinsey 6.
Exactly.
Right.
Like you can try. Like, I can try to have sex with a woman. It doesn't make me bisexual or pansexual or straight. Maybe I want to try it just to see. You know, all I'm saying is I get all of this, that what we're all saying. I just I don't want to diminish the positivity of experimenting.
No, completely agree. People should experiment and do whatever. Like I said, whatever they feel comfortable with. It's super healthy.
Yeah, and don't label yourself if you don't feel comfortable with it. I mean, for me, the reason I scoffed is because, and this was me taking a cue from the film, is that when Nick goes to, like, Beth's former hometown or whatever to investigate her dead husband, the one guy says, you know, she was never a suspect, but her girlfriend was. So in my mind, Beth's response where she says, you know, I fucked your suspect one time, I'm like, but girl, it wasn't one time, because you clearly were bringing Catherine along as your girlfriend places.
Right.
Yeah, and that is the thing where, like, unfortunately, this isn't Beth's story. And that is, like, we're already a 2 hour and 8 minute movie. Do we want to add 20 minutes to give to flesh Beth out more? Now, granted, maybe. Yeah, but
3 hours long.
No. God.
The movie doesn't actually care about any of this, like, and I feel bad for saying this, but I don't think the movie even cares about Beth as a character. This is just to make us question whether Catherine actually is the killer, or could it be Beth?
Right.
And to me, I'm like, it's wholly unsuccessful. It's always Catherine.
Yeah. Okay, I see that.
But she has Bart Simpson keys, so we have to be a little cautious.
It's true. She has good taste, right?
She does. Her finger's on the pop culture pulse.
Yes.
Okay, so Catherine's book Shooter, she calls Nick's character Shooter.
Wait, I'm sorry, but her first book that we see earlier in the film is called Love Hurts, which what I don't buy for a second. That she would name her book something as generic as Love Hurts.
I know. It's kind of like a trashy paperback, which
right?
I feel like it's not the vibe.
It's giving book talk.
Yeah, Shooter makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think of, I can't remember when She Devil is, but it contains my all-time favorite fictional book title, Love in the Rinse Cycle. And I'm like, if that's a better book title than fucking Love Hurts, then Catherine Tremont needs a better agent.
Love hurts.
Everybody hurts in this movie.
Right? So I do love that Catherine just flips this switch. You know, we literally see this manuscript printing in the dot matrix printer. Woo! Flashback. And she is stone cold to Nick. She is completely done with him. And he's so mad and confused.
Yes.
Like, what did you expect?
It's like, you just ran her lover off the road and killed her.
So then Gus dies in this elevator, and as the queer reading of this movie, if we do think of Gus as a potential love interest for Nick, I'm like, oh, okay, well, there's getting rid of the other potential barrier to the heterosexual romance.
Killing all the gays.
Right.
But not all of them.
One
remains. So, yeah, then Beth appears, and Nick, like, ooh. The tricky part of this, like, misogyny, bisexuality, queer reading of this movie is when Nick says something shitty like, you still like girls, Beth, and then shoots her dead.
But again,
I know.
like,
it's Nick is a shitty character, and it's illustrating that. But if you think of Nick as your audience proxy in 1992, you're like, ooh, well, that's not great.
But I think, though, again, that going back to media literacy, that is people mistaking protagonist for character I'm meant to root for.
Yes,
right.
Yes. Like, you can have a bad person as your lead, and honestly, that's sometimes more engaging than if you just have, like, a bland vanilla nothing.
Almost always.
Joe, how many times have we talked about blando protagonist final girl syndrome?
Oh my God, so often.
I think that's why this movie is just discussed to death. You know, there's a lot of layers to unpack, and it's in the hands of you.
It's very much these protagonists display characteristics that maybe a lot of viewers have that they aren't willing to fully come to terms with. But to me, that makes it more interesting. Like, all of us have dark impulses. All of us have bad thoughts. All of us have evil thoughts, and we don't like to share those things, especially today. But watching a movie with a character that is inherently like a fucking shitbag like Nick, and granted, I'm not saying I'm like Nick in any shape, way, or form.
We all have a little bit of Nick in us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that to me is fascinating because for me, it offers a catharsis to where I'm like, oh, I'm kind of getting some of my bad shit out of me by watching this character in a film do this, so I don't do it myself, kind of a thing.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I love, or one of the reasons why I love kind of like morally ambiguous media. Again, it's this idea that it is like forbidden in a certain way. You watch erotic thrillers because you want to give in to your basic instincts. Like, literally.
That's the title!
Yeah. And that's
Second time.
part of the fun of them, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's another like really good function that media and art serves.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like an outlet.
Yes. Should always be an outlet.
So after Beth dies, we find the costume because, of course, this is very De Palma, Dressed to Kill. So there's, a discarded costume in the stairwell. And then we go to Beth's apartment. We find, yes, her murder scrapbook, and the case is obviously closed. So now we can get our happy ending. And, of course, this final twisty shot.
Okay, wait. What I love about this, the movie ends. The movie cuts, like, fades to black.
Yes.
And then it fades back in.
Hey, did you see it? Did you see it?
Hey, I got one more for you, baby.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a playfulness in the movie that, again, if you're watching this, you're taking it so seriously. And again, I'm not trying to, like, disparage the mindset of queer folks in the 90s who were obviously living in a very different time period than us who were offended by this.
Mm-hmm.
But, oh my god, the playfulness of this final scene.
It's the playfulness of all of Paul's stuff. It's like, you look
Right.
at like Starship Troopers or this, it's like he has such a clear sense of tone and how to use a camera, and he knows what will elicit, as we've said throughout this whole thing. So it is so winking, like, hey, you're still here. I had you for the 2 hours, and I'm going to give you all the time that you want and have fun with it. Like, that's why it's a good movie.
Yeah. And it's a pretty essential final scene.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm just imagining audiences, like, getting up during the initial fade to black and, like, leaving the theater.
No!
Nicole Kidman would have their head on a spike.
Yes, terrible etiquette.
Cinema. But so that is Basic Instinct. I love the fact that we basically end on this kind of like good for her moment, eh?
It really is a good for her moment.
So, okay, conclusively, do we all think that Catherine Trammell is the mastermind and did all the murders?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I do as well, but apparently it's been a hot topic for the past 30 years.
Yeah.
That it might be not Catherine or all of them, all of the women in this movie.
I think it's all Catherine. I don't know. I just think, like, she's the one who clearly has that element of perfect control. I don't buy that she would manipulate someone else into killing for her when she knows that she can kill someone and get away with it.
Mm-hmm.
We watched Wild Things recently and talked about that movie.
Right. I was literally just thinking about that.
That movie plays with, like, who did it and, like, various murderers and everything like that. And I think that's because ostensibly everyone except for Neve Campbell in that movie is an idiot. And
yes.
I think in this movie, it's just Catherine because everyone's an idiot except Catherine. And, like, therefore, in order to pull off and get away with it, you need to be smart, and she's smart.
She's just operating at a completely different level.
And here's the thing, and that is why it is of vital importance that Catherine is not the protagonist of this movie, at least in terms of screenplay standards. It is Nick. She is the secondary character. There is a version of this movie that has Catherine as the main character where we're privy to all of her doings, and that is Basic Instinct 2.
Yeah, which does not work.
I guess I have to fucking watch this movie.
Okay, you two have to watch it and then report back to us.
We'll watch it together and then we'll follow it with something fun.
Okay, I would consider that.
Yeah.
Yes,
Bound 2.
I mean,
honestly, why not?
I'm always down for it.
Bound 2 should exist.
Yeah, where
Bound
is it?
Back in
the
the habit.
Wachowskis need to come back to it. They gave us a Matrix sequel. We need
Where's
a Bound.
2?
Well, actually, I guess we're getting it in Chucky season 2.
I was about to say that. They're reuniting on the set of Chucky. I'm very excited.
So hot.
Love it.
It better be hot. That's all I'm saying.
There's not one
It better be
smooch.
hot.
What are we doing?
Yep.
Oh, there better be some major cunnilingus in that show.
Yep.
But
Ooh, I guess we could say one positive thing about Nick. Yeah, he does eat pussy.
He does.
Oh, Michael Douglas famously goes down. We all know this.
I think that even if there was a movie in which Michael Douglas's character isn't eating pussy, he would contractually stipulate that a scene should be added.
Right.
Just to really...
I won't do full frontal, but I will.
I will go down.
Yeah.
I won't show my dick, but I will gladly eat a pussy. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. The fact that he is a sex addict in real life really adds some extra layers to this as well.
No, is he? Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's sad.
Anyway, well, that has been Basic Instinct.
Wah, wah.
Wah wah.
Final thoughts, Brooke and Jordan. What do you want to say?
great movie. I honestly, like, I really love this film, and I would encourage people, well, if you listen to this whole episode, then you won't be going in cold, but I encourage people to watch this movie with as little social framework as possible and just kind of, like, focus on the story, because I really do think that there's nothing quite like this movie, and I respect it in so many different ways. Sharon Stone for president. Thank you and good night.
Honestly, I feel like there's not much more else to say. It is, I think, just like so perfect, and as like time marches forward, as we all head toward our, you know, like inevitable death, I think that this movie just gets better and better. No, honestly, like each time, like I've rewatched it, like I don't know, the first time I watched it was probably in college or something, and I was like, oh wow, this movie is a movie. And then upon rewatch, it just gets better, and you pick up on so much more, and like the way that sexuality is seen, and like morality, and the way that he's playing with all of these various different things. And like there's a world in which you look at this movie and you're like, oh, it's just a base erotic murder mystery, like whatever. But it's not that at all, and it's so much smarter than that, like Catherine Trammell. So I don't know.
It's the Catherine Trammell of erotic thrillers.
It truly is the Catherine Trammell of all erotic thrillers.
Oh, how beautifully put.
Yes.
Before, because Joe, this is your movie, so I'll let you close it out. But I will say that I won't cap off anything more than what y'all have said. I agree with everything y'all have said. I will say for a good later career Sharon Stone role, it is not a good movie per se, but it's a really good role for Sharon Stone, and that is Emilio Estevez's 2006 film Bobby, about the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy. She plays a nail salon employee who is doing Lindsay Lohan's nails in the film, and it is... movie is fine, not great, but Sharon Stone is easily the best part of the film in a very understated role. So, again, if you're like, where did Sharon Stone go after 2006 when Basic Instinct killed her career? Watch Bobby. Just for her.
Sharon Stone Renaissance when? That's all I'll say.
Please.
I thought when she started showing up in Ryan Murphy things, it meant that she was going to be like back in a Quentin Tarantino kind of vibe.
I mean,
and it fucking hasn't happened.
He should use her. Like, if you have seen The Quick and the Dead, a perfect movie. Like,
I love The Quick and the Dead.
Why is she not in like a Tarantino Western or something? You know, like she should have been in Django.
I know, Joe, you and I disagreed about Ratched, but is Sharon Stone not the best part of Ratched?
Oh, 100%. That and the costume design.
Right. She's been, coming back into stuff. We have Ratched, we have The Flight Attendant.
Is she in the new like feud thing they're doing, or no? Like with all the Capote women, or no?
Oh, I don't know about that.
I don't think so.
That's a bummer.
But yeah, there's some stuff, so we'll keep an eye out.
Yeah, it's something we all want.
Yes,
it is.
Okay, well, I'm going to close this out, and as I am apt to do, I found a really good quote. So I'm going to bring in Adam Morrison, who was writing on the Blacklist blog, a piece on essential LGBTQ films. Basic Instinct. And so he writes this. When was the last time you saw a movie where a gay character was the wealthiest person in the room? Catherine Trammell is worth $100 million. When was the last time you saw a movie where a gay character was the smartest person in the room? Catherine Trammell holds 2 degrees, one in psychology and one in creative writing from Berkeley, no less. When was the last time you saw a gay character be the most successful? Catherine's books are all bestsellers. When was the last time a gay character was all 3 of those things at once? Probably never.
She did that.
She really did.
She did that.
This is why it is a feminist and queer forward masterpiece.
Yeah.
Bada bing.
God. This was great.
Yes. Thank you so much for trusting us with this movie. Truly an honor.
Well, of course. And, before we run into our regular housekeeping shit, Brooke and Jordan, please let our listeners know, where can they find you on social media and your podcast?
Yes, if you are interested in more of us or the Queer Quadrant, including our version of the Basic Instinct episode, very difficult to hold a candle to what we've done here today, but we do our best.
A different flavor.
Exactly. You can find us mostly on Twitter. I'm at Brooke B. Solomon.
Jordan H. Gus.
And we're also on Letterboxd at Brooke B. Solomon.
Jordan H. Gus.
And you can find the Queer Quadrant on Twitter at Queer Quadrant, and on Spotify, on Apple, wherever else you care to get your podcasts.
Ice Picks.
Yep. check us out and feel free to tweet at us. Let us know.
Only Catherine Trammell gifts.
What you think, what a good time you had, and what you might like to see us cover.
Nice. My request for next summer is I would like you to do what you've done with the Fast and Furious franchise this year. I think I put this in writing, but I would like you to do the X-Men film.
Look, yes. Definitely having a conversation about it.
We would love to. I think the Bryan Singer of it all it really hurts.
It does.
But I would honestly love to talk about them. Same. So just know the wheels are
New
turning.
Mutants, baby!
The wheels are turning.
I mean, honestly, though, discussing films with problematic creators like child rapist Bryan Singer, that adds
it's
really
worth a discussion.
Yeah,
adds a layer.
Certainly does.
Well, okay. Well, if you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Twitter and Instagram at HorrorQueers, or shoot us an email at horrorqueers@gmail.com. Find us on Letterboxd, keep track of all the films we've covered, and go to our YouTube channel to check out our interviews with various horror filmmakers, as well as our monthly hangouts where we talk about hot button issues with some of our peers. And if you want to chat with other listeners, please join our Facebook Horror Queers group. But most importantly, if you want to show Joe and me some love, please go rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We love a star rating, but we love a review.
True.
And if you want even more content, please support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. We are finally in October. This is the first episode of October, so if you go to our Patreon for the month, we will have episodes on the Grady Hendrix adaptation of My Best Friend's Exorcism.
Hey!
Hell yeah.
Hocus Pocus 2.
Wow.
The new Hulu Hellraiser starring Jamie Clayton.
Yeah.
David Gordon Green's Halloween Ends.
Okay.
Will evil die tonight?
Oh, God. Hopefully forever. And of course, we'll have an audio commentary on one of the best horror remakes ever made in 2002's The Ring.
Yeah.
Woo!
Okay, everyone. So yeah, go sign up for that, get that shit. But Joe, what are we covering next week as we continue our spooky month of October?
Well, before Halloween can end, we should probably let it kill, so we're going to open the Patreon vault from last year and speak about that decidedly unsatisfying second entry in the trilogy.
Y'all, we tried to be fair. If I remember correctly, when we recorded this last year, you were like, I know I was right. I was like, I'm really upset because I liked the 2018 one.
Right. Yeah, I feel like we are fair to it, but we are also quite critical. So I'll be interested to see folks who like Halloween Kills if they're going to be happy with us. But you'll have to wait till next week to find out.
And until next week, everyone, I think we can cross out Basic Instinct.
But not Risk Addiction. That's
that's a future episode, apparently.
Maybe. Yes, and cross out Horror Queers.
Atlas Avenue, a long stretch of road that encompasses everything the city of Kennett Heights has to offer. Neon lights, traffic, crime, the hustle and bustle of everyday life, and the craziest of characters. My office was above it all. My name is James Locke, and I'm a PI.
Hello, Mr. J. How the hell you doing today?
Good, Edith. Nearly every year I have a new case. New people to meet, new clues to discover, and new problems to solve. But I do it the old-fashioned way. No technology. Nothing post-1950. Hell, I don't even listen to podcasts, but you should. Atlas Avenue Beat is a spoof of the film noir genre with goofy characters, tons of wordplay, and non-stop raunchy humor. There's also 3 whole seasons out right now with more on the way. Just search for Atlas Avenue Beat wherever you listen to podcasts or visit us online at bloody.fm.
Hello, I'm Shelby Scott, the host of Scare You to Sleep, a podcast where I tell you spooky bedtime stories full of creepy sound effects and music that is soothing yet unsettling to help immerse you into a world of horror. This is a show for those of us who have realized horror can be a strange but relaxing escape from reality. Speaking of escapes, sometimes I lead you through guided nightmares, like a guided meditation, but instead of flowery meadows, I take you on a journey through your own personal nightmare. So come get lost in the terror with me. Listen to Scare You to Sleep wherever you listen to podcasts, or find us online at bloody.fm. Sweet screams.